Serve a steak, you poor people.
Nancy, my sister-in-law, sneered at the homemade dishes laid out on the table. I was too shocked to speak.
How can you expect us to eat this pathetic food? Can't you even serve steak? Are you poor or just stingy? Serve steak already.
Mary, her mother, had lovingly prepared the meal for their long-awaited return, but Nancy tossed her fork aside. Nancy had pushed the family business onto John, my husband and the second son in their family, and lived as they pleased, only showing up after 5 years. Her husband, Daniel, was still under her selfish thumb.
What? This food looks terrible. We made the effort to come here, and this is all you can offer?
Nancy cursed at the food set before her. Beside her, Daniel was smirking. Why did they even come back? No matter that he's the eldest son, this was not the right way to reunite. I was at my breaking point, but John's feelings were likely more complex and intense.
This is the last time we'll be seeing you.
John stood up and spoke to Daniel and Nancy in a low voice. It was the first time I had seen the usually gentle and kind John show such a stern expression. My name is Victoria Smith, a 45-year-old housewife. I've been married to John, the second son of the Smith family, for 12 years. Now, we live with John's parents and our 10-year-old daughter in his family home. Until our daughter Emma turned 1, we lived in an apartment near my parents' place. Having my mom close by during my pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum period was a great comfort. If possible, I would have liked to stay near my mom until Emma got a little older, but everything changed 9 years ago on the day of that family meeting.
I mentioned it beforehand, but today we're going to talk about the future of this house.
It was Nancy, Daniel's wife, who brought it up in a tone that suggested she found it bothersome. Nancy, with her flashy clothes, makeup, and way of speaking, looks much younger than me. But she's the same age as I am. Daniel, John's older brother, is weak-willed and can't stand up to Nancy. Yet, he always acts tough towards his parents, Mary and Kevin, and my husband John. After drifting from one job to another, saying each wasn't right for him, he seemed like a hopeless guy to me. That hopeless guy then spat out, sounding even more annoyed.
Let's get this over with.
John and I had been vaguely informed that we were summoned to discuss our future. I was worried that something might be wrong with Mary or Kevin's health, but it didn't seem to be the case, which was a bit of a relief. I had left my daughter Emma with my mom so she wouldn't interrupt the discussion.
I'm sorry. Thanks for gathering despite your busy schedules.
Really, we could have handled this over the phone instead of coming all the way out to this rural area. Anyway, let's get started quickly.
In front of us, Mary and Kevin sat looking apologetic. For some reason, they seemed smaller than usual, and I felt a little sorry for them.
We've managed so far, but recently our bodies just haven't been cooperating. We're thinking it might be time to step down.
Step down? Do you mean retiring? Or are you closing the shop?
John seemed a bit surprised. The family business was a small construction company. Besides Mary, who handled the office work, there were about 3 employees, and it had been a trusted, steady business in the community for 40 years, unaffected by the economy.
We thought about closing it, but we still have ongoing projects, and there might be more coming up. So, we called you to see if there's a way to keep it going.
That's why, John, we want you to take over.
What? Wait a minute. You can't just drop this on me. I have my job and my family. You don't have kids yet, so you are more flexible.
Because you have a kid, you're the better choice. Your child is happier in nature, right? And wouldn't it be great for her to live with her grandparents? Right, Victoria?
I tried to process the sudden news, my mind racing. So, you're saying John should quit his job to take over the construction company, and we should move here as a family to live with Kevin and Mary?
Exactly. You seem like you fit right into rural life. We're counting on you.
There's no way we can make such an important decision on the spot.
John was right.
Well, they might as well just shut down the company otherwise.
Nancy said that offhandedly.
But that won't work, right? John, consider our parents' feelings and take this on willingly.
But there is the option of you guys taking over the business, right, Daniel?
No, Nancy, being a city girl, can't handle living out here. And if mom and dad get sick, there will be caregiving responsibilities too.
I clearly remember feeling sickened by how they talked about their parents as if they were a burden. During my pregnancy, Mary and Kevin frequently sent fresh vegetables from the countryside, and when Emma was born, they rushed over to hold her lovingly. So, seeing them now, looking apologetic and downcast, made my heart ache. Please let us think about it on our own for a while. It didn't take long for us to decide to live together after that day. We moved far from my parents, and John changed jobs for us to live together with Mary and Kevin. I needed a certain level of determination, but I think John's resolve was much greater than mine. He quit his job and stepped into a completely unknown world.
Victoria, thank you. I'm not confident about running the construction business, but I'll do my best so you and Emma won't have any troubles. I'm counting on your support.
Even then, John asked me sincerely. John's kindness is something he inherited from his parents. Kevin and Mary will help us, so let's not stress too much. Thank you for everything. And so, our life together began. The saying, "It's easier done than said," held true, as living together turned out to be stress-free, and we quickly adapted to rural life. With John around, Kevin regained his energy and was often busy going out to the sites or giving John advice. Mary still works as an office clerk. Supported by them, John has become a respectable business owner. Emma, who was 1 year old, grew up loved by Mary and Kevin and is now 10 years old. She loves animals, especially horses.
Grandpa, Grandma, let's go to the ranch.
There is a ranch a short drive away, and Mary and Kevin often took her there. One Sunday afternoon, Emma was asking Mary and Kevin to take her to see the animals again.
Maybe I should go too.
John got up from where he was relaxing in the living room as he said that.
Then Mom should come too.
Yeah, I guess I'll go too.
Yeah. Let's all go. And let's get ice cream.
Emma was excited. It had been a while since we all went out together, so I felt a little excited too. Everyone got ready and headed out the door. Just as we were about to get into the car to leave,
Cool car.
I looked in the direction Emma was pointing and saw a flashy convertible heading our way. I had a bad feeling. The car didn't slow down and came to a rough stop right in front of us.
This is the worst. My hair is all gritty from the dust. My skin feels rough too. This is why I hate the countryside.
We should have put the top up as soon as we got off the highway. I forgot how dusty it can be out here.
As I expected, it was Daniel and Nancy getting out of the car. This was the first thing they said after showing up unannounced for the first time in 5 years.
Grandma, who are these people?
You haven't seen them in a long time, so it's no wonder you don't remember. This is your dad's older brother and his wife.
Hello.
Daniel and Nancy barely glanced at Emma despite her greeting them.
What's going on? Why are you here all of a sudden?
Do we need a reason to come? This is my family home.
Meeting them after 5 years, they seemed even more unpleasant than before. Still, Mary, who seemed to adore Daniel, said with a smile,
Of course not. I'm glad you came. We were just about to go to the ranch. Would you like to come with us?
The ranch. Why would I go to a place that smells like animals?
I wish they'd just leave. Why did they come here? Oblivious to my irritation, Emma was excited.
The ranch doesn't smell. The animals are so cute. Come with us.
Hey, tell this kid something. Well, what's your name again?
I'm Victoria. They had even forgotten my name.
Oh, right, Victoria. Look, we've been in the car for a long time and we're tired. Aren't you supposed to offer us some coffee and let us rest before dragging us out?
I'm sorry. I'll get some coffee right away. Please come in. Hiding my discomfort, I opened the door and invited them inside.
Mom, what about the ranch?
I'm sorry. We'll definitely go on the next break. I whispered softly to Emma, who looked like she was about to cry. Even though she's still a child, Emma has developed a bit of maturity and seemed to understand my situation.
Okay, I'll go play with my friends then.
Emma left the house. Then, everyone except Emma sat in the living room.
This house hasn't changed at all. Aren't you going to remodel it? You're earning now, right? It seems like things are going well.
I like the old design, but eventually we'll need to make some updates.
Really? So, you must have saved a lot by now?
Not really. And we never know what might happen with the construction business, so we need to keep some savings. We're not struggling, but we're not exactly swimming in money either.
Nancy kept glancing at me.
You still dress like you shop at discount stores.
Her condescending attitude towards me hadn't changed.
If you're not struggling, you should spend a little more on fashion. You're probably just saving up and hoarding money, aren't you?
It was strange how much they were probing into our finances, especially considering they arrived in an expensive car and were decked out in flashy designer clothes. I could imagine they were living quite comfortably. What on earth are they here for? To brag about their wealthy lifestyle? It was hard to believe they came just to see Mary and Kevin, but it was equally hard to think they came without any purpose.
Hey, are you seriously just giving us coffee? We haven't had lunch, you know.
The clock showed 3 p.m. Nancy pulled out a cigarette, looking annoyed. I'm sorry, it slipped my mind. I'll prepare something right away. I hurriedly stood up and headed to the kitchen. Mary followed me. Mary, I'll take care of it. You should go talk to them. It's been a while since you've seen them. It had been 5 years since they last saw Daniel and Nancy. Despite their quirks, I'm sure she was happy to see them.
It's been a while, so I want to make something for them. It won't be fancy though.
Mary's warm smile erased my unpleasant feelings. I hope I can become someone as gracious as her someday. Then I'll be your assistant, Mary. Mary is a genius in the kitchen. She didn't really need an assistant. While I prepared one dish, she skillfully made several delicious dishes with whatever was in the fridge. We carried the dishes and set them on the table. The table was now full of appetizing food. I'm sorry for the wait. It's been a while since you had Mary's cooking, right? Please help yourselves. However, Nancy didn't hide her displeasure and tossed the fork aside.
What? This food looks terrible. We made the effort to come here, and this is all you can offer?
I couldn't believe my ears. But I calmed myself and asked, Is there something you don't like?
That's not what I'm saying.
Nancy, possibly irritable from hunger, spoke even more harshly. The food might not be fancy, but Mary made it with love. How can she say such things? I was filled with sadness and anger. So, what do you mean?
Serve us steak, you poor people.
I was too shocked to speak.
How can you expect us to eat this pathetic food? Can you even serve steak? Are you poor or just stingy? Serve steak already.
Daniel just watched Nancy's outrageous behavior with a grin. I was at my breaking point. I've swallowed my pride many times, but today is unforgivable. It felt like Mary's heart was being trampled on, and I couldn't stand it. Just as I was about to snap back, John stood up before I could say anything.
This is the last time we'll be seeing you.
What?
I had never seen such a stern look on his face. John was usually so gentle, and Nancy seemed taken aback for a moment.
What do you mean by last time?
Daniel, who had been smirking at the situation, now looked flustered.
It means exactly what it sounds like. We won't be seeing each other again.
When did you get so high and mighty? Just because you took over the business, don't get cocky. I'm the eldest son. I have the authority in this house.
You were just born before me. That's all. You haven't done anything as the eldest son or as a family member. You don't have any authority over this house.
What did you say?
Daniel stood up. He clenched his fists, his face turning bright red. Despite his weak nature, he was quick to anger. Unlike Mary, Kevin, and John, who were all calm, I wondered who he took after.
Stop it. This is going to get messy.
It was Nancy who stopped Daniel, who looked like he was about to hit John.
I'll make sure this is the last time we meet if that's what you want, but it won't come for free. We're adults. You understand that, right?
So that's it. I finally understood why they suddenly showed up. They had come to ask for money. These two always showed up when it involved money. It had been 5 years, so I had forgotten. But John remained calm.
I understand. I've been waiting for this day.
Waiting?
Nancy looked frightened at John's smiling response.
Yes. We've all been eagerly waiting for this day. Everyone in the community. We couldn't wait for this day to come.
What does he mean by that? John had never mentioned anything like this to me.
What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind?
In contrast to John's calm demeanor, Nancy was losing her composure.
I'm glad you came sooner than expected. Honestly, I felt bad keeping everyone in the community waiting any longer.
So you're saying we've been keeping everyone here waiting? I don't get it. Explain what you mean.
Nancy was panicking, unable to understand what was being said.
Do you have any idea what he's talking about?
No, nothing.
No, you should have an idea. Here you are.
John pulled a stack of papers from a drawer and handed it to the bewildered Daniel and Nancy.
What? What is this?
You'll understand when you look at it.
Daniel's face turned pale as he flipped through the stack, realizing what it was.
You understand now, right? Don't tell me these don't look familiar.
What? What is all this?
I have no idea.
Daniel's eyes darted around, and sweat was pouring down his forehead. John began reading the contents of the papers aloud.
George, $5,000. Richard, $10,000. Edward, $10,000. These are all IOUs from Daniel to his local friends and relatives. Should I read them all out?
Stop it.
Daniel hastily grabbed the stack of papers from John.
What? Debt. You have debts here too. Let me see.
Nancy snatched the stack of papers from Daniel, who had just grabbed them from John, and began examining each one.
$5,000, $10,000, $3,000. What is this? What the hell is this?
It's all the money Daniel borrowed. The total is over $100,000.
What? You've got to be kidding me. Why did you borrow all this money? Did you lie to me?
Nancy threw the stack of papers at Daniel.
I had no choice. I wanted to see you happy.
According to Daniel, he borrowed the money to buy the expensive brands, flashy cars, and a condo that Nancy liked.
I bought many things for you, but the loan payments for the car and the condo are tough. And you never cook at home. We always eat out. You don't save any money. You leave all the finances to me.
So you're saying it's all my fault. Your earnings are the problem. How can we save anything with what you make? And who's the one losing all the time because they suck at gambling?
I'm sorry, but you gamble with me too. Every time we lose, you tell me to borrow more because we'll definitely win next time. You're the one who made me use the credit cards for loans.
Daniel had loved gambling since he was young. Before getting married, Daniel would spend his entire salary on gambling, playing not only on holidays, but also whenever he had free time on weekdays. When he got engaged to Nancy, Daniel was short on funds and promised Mary and Kevin that he would be more serious from then on, so they had helped him out, as John had once told me. Despite this promise, he had continued gambling. Nancy, who married Daniel, also got deeply involved in gambling. They probably came here after racking up significant debt on credit cards, begging for money. Given this, it's no wonder Nancy, with her fiery personality, was so furious when their new debts were uncovered.
Why are you racking up debt? You don't even have the income to pay it back.
I did it all for you. I wanted to make you happy.
Shut up. Stop blaming everything on me.
I hadn't been told that Daniel had borrowed money from just about everyone he knew locally. John must have wanted to spare me the worry. I was surprised by this turn of events, but it wasn't surprising that Daniel and Nancy had ended up this way. They had been living beyond their means. Why don't you calm down and have some coffee? When I suggested this, Nancy glared at me.
Why are you pretending to be nice? You probably think we deserve this, don't you? It's all your fault for not letting Daniel take over the construction business, so fix it. We're family, aren't we?
Nancy's anger was now directed at our family as well. Her accusations were ridiculous and made no sense. Had she forgotten that 9 years ago, she had refused to live in this rural area? Since that day, John had worked tirelessly at a job that was completely new to him. That's why we've come this far. Nancy seemed to calm down a bit after directing her anger at our family.
Anyway, you can default on these local debts, but we need to repay the credit card loans. Our assets are also ours, so give us our share right now. Think of it as getting our inheritance early.
How could she say such terrible things in front of Mary and Kevin? I was shaking with anger, but John didn't show any reaction.
It can't be helped.
John replied calmly. Nancy's face lit up.
Oh, you're so understanding. As expected of you, John. If you get it, then give us the cash quickly. Then we'll leave and never come back. We won't need anything from this house anymore.
All right, I'll give it to you. Victoria, has everyone gathered?
John asked me, and I opened the front door to check outside. The local people had already gathered.
Please call them in right away.
John had asked me to do this right after Daniel and Nancy showed up. The list he gave me had the phone numbers of the people who are now gathered. I had contacted them without knowing the reason. I invited everyone into the yard. I wasn't sure how many people there were, but the large yard was filled with local people. They were all people who had lent money to Daniel and hadn't been repaid. Later, I heard that John knew Daniel and Nancy were drowning in credit card debt and couldn't see a way out. Daniel had listed John and Kevin as contacts without their permission, so they'd been receiving calls from multiple credit card companies. That's why John had anticipated that they would come begging for money soon.
Please be patient a little longer. Daniel and Nancy will definitely come back. When they do, I want to repay you in front of them.
John went around to each house, asking the locals for their understanding. After taking over from Kevin, John worked earnestly and sincerely, valuing his relationships with people. Everyone trusted him. John and the locals who believed in him had eagerly awaited this day. Unaware, Daniel and Nancy walked right into the situation. For Daniel, it must have been an unexpected turn of events. He couldn't say anything in front of his friends and relatives, and just looked down in embarrassment. No one spoke to Daniel. They only looked at him with disdain.
I'm truly sorry for the trouble Daniel has caused you. Thank you for trusting us. As promised, I will repay the money he borrowed right in front of him.
John apologized to each person and paid off Daniel's debts. Mary and Kevin, standing next to John, also apologized to everyone. Unable to bear watching, I apologized as well.
Stop it. That money is ours, isn't it? Cut it out.
Nancy, unable to accept the situation, screamed hysterically beside the elderly Mary and Kevin, who were apologizing.
Give it back.
Nancy tried to snatch the envelopes full of cash from John's hands. Daniel just stood there, unable to say anything.
Be quiet.
Kevin, who hadn't said a word until then, spoke in a low, commanding voice. It was the first time Kevin, who had never raised his voice in front of us, spoke sternly. Even Nancy fell silent, looking frightened.
I won't allow you to disrespect these people any further.
But it's our money. Without it, we're finished.
Nancy collapsed to the ground, crying.
I'm sorry for their disgraceful behavior.
Kevin apologized to the locals once again and then spoke to Daniel and Nancy.
This money was earned by John, who suddenly became the president of a construction company after being a salaried worker. He worked desperately to earn it. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been.
John shook his head. But having watched him closely, I knew the struggles he went through.
And Victoria has been diligently saving money while supporting John in this unfamiliar place. I am truly sorry that we have to use their savings to pay off your debts.
Kevin's words brought tears to my eyes.
Nancy, it's not our money. You two pushed the construction company onto John and Victoria because you didn't want to live in the countryside, and now you have the nerve to say that. Have you no shame?
The two of them couldn't say anything. Daniel placed his hand on Nancy's shoulder.
Don't touch me.
Nancy angrily shook off his hand and cried out.
I wish I had never married you. I could have been much happier without you.
No matter who she married, it would have been the same. She enjoyed a flashy lifestyle and the thrill of it, always wanting more money and never having enough. And she blamed someone else, never trying to change herself. Ignoring Nancy's continued crying, John finished repaying everyone who had gathered. Finally, Mary, Kevin, John, and I apologized again. As the locals left, thanking us instead, I was relieved that we hadn't let them down and that it didn't end in betrayal.
No one spoke to Nancy or Daniel until the very end.
I'm sorry for keeping it from you, and I'm sorry for acting on my own without consulting you. John apologized, but there was no way I could disagree with his actions this time. Once everyone left, a quiet time followed, with only Nancy's sobbing breaking the silence. John was the first to speak.
We're no longer family, so don't ever come to our house again.
Daniel just stood there in a daze at John's words.
This is the last time. So if there's anything you want to take with you, Take it all now. I'll dispose of whatever's left of your belongings.
I remembered that Daniel's childhood albums and graduation certificates were still in the room upstairs. Thinking about how Mary had carefully preserved them pained me, but when I saw the untouched food left on the table, my feelings quickly turned cold. I don't want them to visit ever again. I want them to take everything and leave no trace behind so that we can't even remember their existence. These people were no longer family. I felt sorry for Mary, but I didn't want them to leave anything behind. Please pack everything into this. Take everything, leaving nothing behind, so you have no reason to come back. Daniel snatched the large bag I handed him and went upstairs. After a while, he came down, dragging his belongings, and silently helped Nancy to her feet, heading toward the door. As she walked, Nancy glanced into the paper bag. She was checking to see if there was anything valuable inside. That was so typical of Nancy.
What's the point of taking this stuff back? It's worthless. What are we going to do now?
I'll figure something out. Let's just go home.
You can't fix this, which is why we came here. What are we going to do?
Were they still planning to argue? I didn't care, but I wished they would do it after they left. At 5 p.m., Emma came home.
Hi. Oh, I'm so hungry.
Her bright demeanor lightened the mood.
Wow. Look at this feast. It looks delicious.
She was delighted to see the untouched food we had prepared for Daniel and Nancy. The same food that Nancy had insulted as pathetic now made Emma's eyes sparkle. We'll reheat it and enjoy it together as a family of 5 once they're gone.
Are Uncle and Auntie leaving already?
Emma looked disappointed. They have to go because they have something to do. I answered on behalf of Daniel and Nancy, who said nothing.
I wanted to go to the ranch with them.
Daniel and Nancy left without looking back at Emma's words. Later, Daniel and Nancy continued to take out more credit card loans to repay their existing ones. And they spent their days gambling, dreaming of a big win. But there was no such reversal, and when they found themselves in dire straits, Daniel shamelessly tried to borrow money from his local friends again. It was amazing he even dared to ask. No one would lend money to Daniel, who had lost everyone's trust. By that time, he no longer had any friends. With no one to help them, they defaulted on their condo loan and had to give it up. Naturally, they also lost the flashy convertible to repay their debts and eventually declared bankruptcy. We learned they were admitted for addiction treatment when the hospital called us. Unable to pay their hospital bills, the hospital contacted John to request payment. They had listed John as the guarantor. Even at this stage, they were still causing trouble. Of course, John had no obligation to pay. He informed the hospital that he had no knowledge of this, and that they must have listed him without his permission, refusing to pay the bill. What happened to them when they couldn't pay their hospital bills, we don't know, and we don't want to know. They are no longer part of our lives. A year has passed since that ordeal. It turns out John has a talent for being a business owner. The construction company continues to grow. The number of employees has increased, and Kevin, far from retiring, is more enthusiastic than ever. With Mary's help, I've been entrusted with the office work. I was worried about Mary. She had to cut ties with Daniel and Nancy in such a manner. She must be hurt. But thankfully, she seems to be doing well. She helps around the house and occasionally assists me with my work. She complains about having more to do than before, but she seems to enjoy it. Our days are busy, but filled with laughter. Today is a day off, so let's all go out.
Yes,
Where do you want to go?
the ranch.
Mary squints her eyes with a smile.
Emma really loves animals. All right, I'll quickly make some lunch, so please wait a bit.
Grandma's lunch. Yeah,
John is probably still enjoying a lazy Sunday morning. These simple holidays are truly a joy.
Grandpa, let's play cards while we wait.
All right. But I won't go easy on you, so be ready.
I won't go easy either, Grandpa. I'm not going to lose.
I can hear the laughter of Emma and Kevin. I go to wake up John and help Mary with making lunch. May this happiness last forever. I made this wish as I put on my apron.
My name is Michelle Turner, and I'm 46 years old. I'm a full-time housewife. My husband, Ted, works as an employee at a major car manufacturer. We don't have any kids, and we've tried multiple rounds of fertility treatments, but they haven't been successful, and since the costs are so high, we've recently given up. Ever since we stopped the treatments, Ted has been acting strangely. He's been coming home late from work and leaving the house a lot on weekends, which wasn't like him before. Hey, he's weird lately. He hasn't gone out this much before. I asked my sister, Emily, for advice about Ted. Emily is 14 years younger than me, and I've always thought she was adorable. In fact, she's really cute and has always been popular. I thought that with her experience, Emily might have some insight.
Well, maybe he just feels like a weight has been lifted off his shoulders.
A weight off his shoulders?
Yeah, you've been going through fertility treatment since you got married, right? It must have been tough for him mentally. Now that you're done, he's probably just cutting loose a little.
That makes sense. We were even cutting back on drinking during the treatments, and I probably pushed Ted too hard. I agreed with Emily's words. Thanks, Emily. You always know what to say.
You're welcome.
Emily smiled sweetly at me. But just a week later, everything took a sudden turn.
I want a divorce.
A divorce. I was stunned by Ted's sudden words. Wait, it's too sudden to think about it, so give me some time. That's all I managed to say. Emily, what should I do? I knew something was off with him.
Michelle, calm down. What exactly happened?
I reached out to Emily again and told her everything. Ted asked for a divorce. Even when I asked him why, he wouldn't answer, and now I just don't know what to think. Emily tilted her head and put her finger to her chin, deep in thought.
Maybe Ted really wanted kids?
Kids? I wanted them too.
Yeah, but even after all those doctor visits and spending all that money, you didn't get pregnant, right? Maybe Ted thinks he can't be a father as long as he's married to you.
What? So he's dumping me because of that? If that's the case, he should just say it.
There's no way he'd say that. Like, a woman who can't get pregnant isn't a real woman.
What?
Ted doesn't want to hurt you, so he's avoiding telling you the real reason for your divorce.
Wait, did she just say, a woman who can't get pregnant isn't a real woman? But Emily, sitting right in front of me, looked concerned and held my hand as if to comfort me.
For now, why don't you try talking it out a bit more? Oh, is that the time? Sorry. I've got plans with my boyfriend. See you later, Michelle.
Yeah, see you. Her words stuck with me, but before I could ask, she was gone. Emily's right. I need to find out the reason. I'll talk to Ted. I paid the bill and went home. For the next month, no matter how much I asked, Ted still wouldn't give me a reason for wanting our divorce. Frustrated, I stubbornly refused to agree to the divorce. How long is this going to go on? Why won't Ted just tell me what's going on? There's no way I can accept this. It's like we've both entered a standoff, waiting to see who will give in first. Suddenly, the doorbell rang cheerfully. Oh, Emily's here? Emily was on the screen, smiling and waving. It's rare for her to come by without a heads up. I invited Emily inside. Why the sudden visit? As I asked, Ted came down from the second floor.
She's here.
Did you call her, Ted? For what? I looked back and forth between them, not understanding, and suddenly they turned serious. What sudden? Hey, what's up? I was so confused I nearly crouched down. Then, in a strained voice, Ted said,
I've chosen your sister and our unborn child. Please sign the divorce papers.
What? At that moment, everything clicked. I see. So that's what's been going on. No wonder you couldn't tell me the reason for the divorce.
I'm really sorry, but this is the truth.
Ted had been having an affair with my sister, Emily. The Emily I had adored since she was a little girl. Since when?
Huh?
Since when have you two been involved? Emily spoke up this time.
It's not Ted's fault. It's all me. Do you remember when you and he came to our family's house to introduce him? I kinda liked him back then. Actually, I did.
Wait, are you telling me this has been going on since then?
No, absolutely not. We only started seeing each other in the past 6 months.
Since Ted was your partner, I tried to bury my feelings. But when I heard you two had stopped the fertility treatments, I got worried about him and emailed him.
Yeah, and I was happy to get Emily's email. After that, we started meeting up here and there. And before I knew it,
What the hell? You didn't think cheating on your wife with her sister was wrong.
of course, I did. But talking to Emily just made me feel at peace. I felt like I wanted to protect her.
And I still love him. I can't lie to myself anymore.
What on earth am I witnessing right now? It felt like I was watching some pathetic soap opera unfold right before my eyes, and I was starting to feel beyond anger. Okay, I get the picture. So, Emily, while you were having an affair with Ted, you sat there pretending to be clueless when I asked for advice.
I'm really sorry.
Emily hung her head and apologized meekly.
It's not her fault. This is all on me.
Ted was desperately trying to shield Emily, who looked downcast. But I knew the truth behind that apologetic face of hers.
I've always wanted kids.
I know. That's why we worked so hard up until now.
But it didn't work. I'm sorry, but I want to be a father. Please, sign the divorce papers.
Ted said firmly. Next to him, Emily was gently rubbing her belly. Okay. That single word made both of their faces light up.
Thank you, Michelle.
Michelle, thank you. I knew you'd understand.
It's nothing. Is this the divorce paper? I glanced at the paper on the table.
Yeah, it is.
I'll sign it right now. I grabbed the pen sitting next to the phone and signed the papers. So, you'll be paying me alimony, of course?
Of course. You can have half of our joint account, and I'll also cover your moving expenses.
Well, that settled quickly. I'll go ahead and submit the divorce papers then.
Oh, Michelle, while you're at it, could you submit our marriage license too? It's so hot outside, and well, I am pregnant.
Sure, of course. I went to file my divorce papers with Ted and their marriage papers. When I returned, less than 30 minutes later, Ted, who was no longer my husband, looked at me and asked,
Why are you still smiling?
it was because I was about to give them a little parting gift. Oh, that's because. I looked Ted straight in the eyes. You're being deceived by Emily.
What are you talking about?
Ted furrowed his brows, while Emily, standing slightly behind him, started to avoid my gaze.
Michelle, I'm not feeling well. Can I go home now? Ted, could you take me back?
Emily was clearly eager to leave, pulling on Ted's arm. Oh no, are you okay? In that case, why don't you rest here for a bit? I'll make you something warm to drink. Moving around too much will just make you feel worse.
Yeah, let's stay here a while, all right?
But
Now, about how you're being deceived by Emily.
Michelle,
You know, maybe someone like Emily is exactly what a cheating man like Ted deserves.
Someone like Emily? Isn't that a bit harsh? Especially about your own sister.
Because she's my sister, I know everything. You know, she's been divorced 3 times already.
Divorced? Emily, you were married? 3 times?
And she even has a kid with her last husband.
all 3 of them were abusive.
Emily, lying isn't going to help. All of your divorces were because of your affairs, weren't they? Ted stood there, mouth agape, staring at Emily.
That's not true.
Isn't it? The custody of your child was given to the father, and you're not even allowed visitation rights because a cheating mother is seen as a bad influence.
Tell me that's not true, Emily. Please?
Ted grabbed Emily by the shoulders and shook her violently. Had he forgotten that she was pregnant? Oh, and the alimony for all 3 divorces? Our parents paid for it. They've always spoiled Emily, but I'm afraid this time is different.
Dad and Mom are on my side.
If they still support you after finding out you cheated on your sister's husband and got pregnant, then I'll lose all respect for them.
Wait, I can't follow all this.
Well, you better keep up because we're only getting started. I'm about to tell you all about Emily's colorful love life.
Michelle?
She's always been a serial dater. Even back in high school, she'd be dating 2 or 3 guys at once. And when she became an adult, it only got worse. She started going after men with high-paying jobs. I glanced at Emily, who was now glaring at me with eyes full of rage. I continued without hesitation. Her first husband was a banker, the second was a salesman at a trading company, and the third ran a restaurant.
They just kept getting more prestigious.
Ted was in shock. It's pretty easy to figure out how Emily's mind works, isn't it? But then things started to go downhill.
Downhill?
Most of the good men her age are already married now, and Emily's 32, so she doesn't get as many offers from men as she used to.
Stop making wild assumptions.
Emily, clearly confident in herself, was furious. Emily wasn't getting as much attention from men as she used to, so she was desperate to get married. And then I show up with Ted, a man working for a big company. You must have been really jealous.
Wow, delusional much? You really think you're that great, don't you?
I remember your face when Ted and I came to introduce him to my family. It was scary. You might not have noticed, but you were glaring at me. I thought I was imagining it back then, but now I know I wasn't. Emily marched up to me, raising her right hand.
Emily, calm down. Think about the baby.
Ted grabbed her arm, stopping her as she took deep breaths to regain her composure. Oh, how sweet, thinking of the mother and child.
Michelle, I told you to stop with these crazy fantasies. You've always been jealous of me, haven't you? Our parents adored me, and even your boyfriends liked me more than you.
Emily's counterattack brought back unpleasant memories from the past. Yes, all my boyfriends ended up liking Emily. In high school, I dated a guy from my class. When I invited him over to study, Emily would always come to say hi.
Emily is so cute.
Every single boyfriend said that. And then a few weeks later, they'd all say the same thing.
Sorry, but I've fallen for Emily.
Ever since back then, you've hated me, right? I get it. Then, after you got married, you acted like you'd won or something. It's so annoying. Someone boring like you should just live a boring life.
Emily?
Ted blinked in disbelief, having never seen this side of her before. That's why I didn't introduce you to Emily before marrying you. Every guy I dated before said she gave them signals. Well, it doesn't matter now, but still. Tears welled up in my eyes before I could continue. Even so, I thought of you as my cute little sister, Emily. You were spoiled and selfish, but I told myself my boyfriends just didn't have good taste. But this betrayal, it was true. I had always thought of her as adorable. And that's why the shock of her betrayal cut so deeply, and a fierce sense of betrayal rose up inside me. After wiping my tears, I turned back to Ted. Emily only wanted your salary and your status as a big company employee. Well, maybe she also just wanted to take a man away from me.
Even if all of that is true, your feelings for me are real, right?
Ted looked at Emily, desperately seeking reassurance.
Of course. It wasn't because you were Michelle's partner that I fell in love with you. I love you because you're Ted.
Well done, Emily. Your acting has really improved. Emily had always been good at hiding her true feelings and making others feel special. I remembered how some of our uncles used to shower her with gifts because of it.
Right? Maybe you were like that before, but you're not like that now, right? Emily's grown up.
Yeah.
Here we go again, another pathetic drama unfolding. I crossed my arms and watched the next act of this sad little play. But I couldn't watch this for much longer. It was time to bring the curtain down on this act. People's personalities don't change that easily. If they did, she wouldn't have gone after my husband. As I called out from the audience, the two glared at me, clearly irritated by my interruption.
Michelle, why are you still here? You submitted the divorce papers, so leave now.
Yeah, this is my and Emily's house now. Just pack up your stuff, call a moving company for the rest, and send me the bill later.
Before that, there's one important thing I forgot to mention.
Important thing?
Ted, after everything you've just heard, doesn't any of it bother you?
What do you mean?
Michelle, are you stalling because you don't want to leave? It's pathetic. Just stop.
Emily, you seem awfully eager to kick me out. Is there something you're hiding?
There's nothing.
Really?
Really?
If you insist, maybe that's true. But let me just share one theory I have. As I straightened my posture, both of them did the same, preparing for whatever was coming next. Once the moment felt right, I said what I had been thinking all along. Are you sure the baby Emily is carrying is actually yours, Ted?
What the hell are you saying?
That's horrible. Even you, Michelle, I won't forgive you for this.
Just as I expected, they both flew into a rage. hurling insults at me.
Are you saying that because you're upset about Emily's pregnancy? Are you trying to stress her out and make her miscarry?
Ted grabbed my collar and yanked me towards him. Let go. You're going to stretch out my clothes. My calm reaction only made him grip me harder. I told you it's just a theory. Now let go. I swiftly knocked his arm upward, causing him to lose his balance.
Whoa!
He let out a pitiful sound. Then I explained why I'd suggested it. We've been doing fertility treatments together for over 10 years, and yet you didn't think it was odd that all of a sudden she got pregnant so quickly? Ted smirked, mocking me.
Not at all. The fact that we couldn't conceive, but Emily and I did right away, just proves you were the problem all along.
But I had tests done during our treatments, and they confirmed I didn't have any major issues with fertility. You should remember that, right?
Oh, did they? I don't recall.
You don't even remember something that important. I took those treatments seriously. Did you really want kids, Ted?
Of course I did. That's why I'm divorcing you and marrying Emily.
He spread his arms protectively in front of her.
Anyway, stop insulting my wife.
I looked at Emily, who was being protected by Ted. She stood behind him looking uncomfortable, but Ted, with his back to her, didn't notice. No need for me to point it out to him. I decided to let it go. Then I made a suggestion. Once the baby is born, how about you get a DNA test? Ted's face flushed with anger, and Emily gasped sharply.
Are you still going on about this? Knock it off. You're scaring Emily.
What's she so scared of? Is it that the test might show the baby isn't yours?
She's pregnant. Her emotions are all over the place. Oh, wait. You wouldn't know that, would you? You've never been pregnant.
Wow, you've really done your research. Good for you. Make sure you keep supporting her, okay? No matter what happens.
Obviously. Right, Emily?
Yeah, Michelle. You can live your lonely life alone.
I'll happily do just that. I took my suitcase out of the storage closet and began packing what I needed.
Finally ready to leave, huh?
And make sure you leave the house key, okay? Wouldn't want you making a spare. That would be creepy.
The two of them watched me pack with barely concealed amusement. Once I finished and headed to the door, they followed closely behind.
Take care now. Hope you have a good life.
Bye, Michelle. Don't worry, I'll take good care of this house.
Emily, take care of your health. And Ted.
What is it? I'll listen to anything you have to say one last time.
Make sure you work hard so Emily doesn't ditch you like her previous husbands. I said earlier that her divorces were because of her affairs, but I just remembered there were other reasons too.
Other reasons?
Her first husband was relocated. Her second had poor sales performance, and the third's restaurant went under. Once they stopped bringing in money, Emily cheated and moved on to the next guy.
Huh?
She's the type to cheat just to dump a man who can't make enough money. That's who Emily really is.
Michelle, stop with these crazy fantasies.
I don't think it's a fantasy at all. Anyway, good luck, Ted.
Oh, yeah.
The look on Ted's face just before the door closed was priceless. His whole demeanor screamed, did I make the right decision with this marriage? All right, time to head back to my parents' place. Dragging my suitcase behind me, I headed to the station. A year later, I had started a new job and was living alone. I've been worried about whether I could find work at my age, but my dad pulled some strings with a friend and got me a full-time position. Fortunately, my parents were furious with Emily for everything that had happened and declared that she was no longer their daughter. If they had sided with Emily, I don't know what I would have done, but I'm glad they didn't. Sipping tea from my favorite cup, I was in a great mood. Suddenly, my phone vibrated on the table. I glanced at the screen. It was Ted, my ex-husband. It's been a year since our divorce, so what could he possibly want now? Curious but suspicious, I answered the call. Hello.
Michelle? It's been a while. How have you been?
Ted's voice was flat, and even over the phone, I could sense his exhaustion. Yeah, it has been. What do you want? I replied coldly, without emotion.
Well, I've been thinking about what you said that day, so I took the test.
What test?
The DNA test.
After getting so angry and saying it was impossible.
Yeah. And you were right. The kid isn't mine.
Ted's voice was pained as he muttered the words. I figured as much. Anything else? If not, I'm hanging up.
Is that all you're going to say? At least hear me out. When I told Emily about it, she just said, "Oh, really?" Like it didn't even matter. Meanwhile, I'm standing there, my mind totally blown.
Did you really think someone who's been divorced 3 times would care about who her child's father is? Her mind is completely messed up.
You were right. I wish I could turn back time. Since we got married right after our divorce, I'm listed as the father on the birth certificate.
Why are you stating the obvious? I rolled my eyes.
I mean, I'm going to have to raise a child that isn't even mine. Just thinking about it makes me sick.
You are truly the worst. Sick. You ignored my warnings, married her, and had a child, and now the baby is the real victim. One thing is clear, you're not fit to be a father. Ted sounded confused as I began to speak more forcefully. I can't stand this anymore. I'm hanging up.
Wait, I haven't gotten to the real reason I called.
Is there something worse?
I need your help.
Why would I help you?
Emily's spending is out of control. I had to give you half of our savings and pay alimony, so I need to save. But she doesn't care about our budget at all.
None of this is new. Didn't I tell you that all her past husbands made good money and that she only chose men based on their income? That's why I told you to work hard.
I didn't think it would be this bad.
Emily has always loved the flashy life and would constantly ask her boyfriends to buy her things.
But she wasn't like that with me.
That was part of her plan. If she acted modest and wore simple clothes, men would let their guard down and think she was a low-maintenance sweet girl. You were dancing in the palm of her hand, just like the others. Ted said nothing. Emily's personality hasn't changed, and now you're the one paying the price. After a moment, Ted began to speak quietly.
I told Emily once to stop wasting money. She said it was a reward for giving birth. If the baby had been mine, I might have understood. But it wasn't, so her words didn't mean anything to me.
I silently listened to Ted's story. But in reality, I was glancing through a shopping catalog while he spoke.
So, I took away her family credit card and told her to start keeping a budget. That's when she brought up our divorce.
So she basically told you that you were no longer useful, just like all her other husbands. Ted fell silent again, unable to reply. About a minute passed before he spoke up once more, just as I was about to hang up.
Emily said she'd give me full custody of the child.
To Emily, the child must have been nothing more than an obstacle in her search for her next husband. She is the most terrifying human being.
I regret it so much. Marrying Emily after betraying you was the worst mistake of my life.
I know how badly you wanted a child. I wanted one too. But when I finally came to terms with not being able to have one and tried to move forward, you betrayed me. I will never forgive you for that.
I'm really sorry, Michelle. I know this is so much to ask, but
Ted's voice faltered. I had a bad feeling. What is it?
could you lend me some money?
Excuse me? The request was so outrageous, I responded as if I were in a comedy sketch.
It looks like we're headed for a court battle over the divorce and custody.
When most people fight over custody, it's about who gets to take the child. But in your case, it's a fight over who can dump the child on the other. You're both pathetic.
Yeah, you're right. But I can't afford the court fees. Please, I'll pay you back. Maybe not all at once, but in installments.
Installments? Absolutely not. There's no way I'm helping to fund that pathetic excuse for a legal case. As I rejected his request, I heard the sound of a baby crying in the background. Is the child with you? What about Emily?
Emily left 2 days ago and hasn't come back. I might not see her again until the court date. Her parents said she hasn't gone back to their place either.
Of course not. She's been practically disowned.
Where could she be?
That's your problem. Good luck with that.
Wait. So, are you going to lend me the money or not?
Of course not. Don't make me laugh. We're not connected anymore, Ted, so I don't owe you anything. Good luck with your court case. And with that, I hung up the phone. Ted called back immediately, but I ignored it and blocked his number. In the end, Ted and Emily didn't go to court. Instead, they settled the divorce through mediation. But it didn't go as smoothly as they expected, and it remained at a standstill for a while.
It seems like they're arguing over the division of assets. Emily wants the house that you and Ted used to live in. She's so selfish.
My mom, who had come over for a visit, grumbled as she sipped her coffee. At first, after my divorce, my mom had felt some guilt over cutting Emily off. But after seeing how Emily behaved during the mediation, that guilt disappeared, and she no longer had any sympathy for her. Ted's refusing to let her have the house, right? I mean, it's the one thing he was able to keep after giving me half the savings and paying the alimony. The idea of Emily taking it now is pretty hilarious.
It really is.
Mom and I laughed out loud as we munched on some snacks.
Neither of them wants custody of the baby. I can't believe how they're treating life. It's horrifying to think she's my own child.
Emily has always been selfish and only interested in herself. I never imagined she'd be so indifferent to her own child, though.
Usually, mothers have an advantage in custody battles. But considering Emily's lack of a job and difficult personality, Ted might actually end up with custody.
Who knows? It's hard to say.
The baby didn't do anything wrong, and it's just so sad.
But if you try to help, you'll only be enabling Emily again. We have to stay strong and not let her manipulate us this time. Otherwise, it'll be the same cycle all over again. We decided to stay out of the situation and let things play out. As for me, I'm enjoying my return to the working world. I'm not a full-time employee, but the company I work for gives bonuses, so I feel motivated to keep going. I never thought at almost 50 I'd land a job this good. I'm incredibly grateful to the company for hiring me, and I plan to work as hard as I can. As for my weekends, I'm going to use them for myself to relax and have fun. Now that I'm single again, I'm excited for my future.
My mistress is pregnant. Take my dad and leave. Hey, what do you think you're saying without helping with the care?
Ryan, calm down. At first, my husband didn't seem to know who Ryan was. But after seeing my attitude and hearing the name, he finally remembered his own son. He openly frowned and glared at Ryan with displeasure.
What are you doing here? Just showing up now. You must be after the money. I'm not giving a single cent to a cold-hearted son like you. Leave with that woman too.
Ryan seemed too shocked by his words to respond. In contrast, I felt a chilling calm come over me. Fine, but I'm leaving your dad behind, because... I lifted the blanket off my father-in-law and showed his back to my husband. My husband's eyes started trembling and darting around. He seemed to have misunderstood. I need to make him realize that not everything goes his way. I am Emily Smith, 53 years old. I married my husband, Mike, through an arranged introduction in my 20s. Our son, Ryan, is now living independently, and currently, I live with Mike and my father-in-law, George, in their family home. Although we have been married for a long time, my relationship with Mike isn't great. Ever since my parents passed away, Mike and his father have been treating me increasingly poorly. They make degrading remarks about women daily. Mike's mother passed away years ago, so I have no one on my side. Only Ryan supports me. But I don't want him to be stuck in a place like this forever. Even after he moved out, Ryan kept in touch and showed his concern for me, but I always tried to assure him that I was managing fine, to keep him from worrying. Life felt like walking on thin ice, but even that fragile piece shattered when something happened.
Is Ryan not coming by this month either? After all I've done for him. Running off like this is what he learned.
At breakfast, my father-in-law banged the table loudly. Startled, I dropped my shoulders and lowered my gaze. Ryan didn't get along with his hot-tempered grandfather or my husband, who always followed his father's lead and had stopped visiting after starting college. He kept in frequent contact with me and showed his concern, but I never told him to come by. I didn't want my dear son tied to a place like this.
Hey, are you listening? It's because you waste time working instead of caring for the housework. Women like you shouldn't have gone to college, wasting time on titles instead of being useful.
Despite being married to Mike for years, my father-in-law has never once addressed me by name. All I ever heard were terms like hey or you, spat at me with disdain. Naturally, he'd never said thank you or apologized either. Mike, influenced by his father, rarely used my name as well. To both of them, it seemed like I was just a housekeeper.
A woman should keep the house, but you're still playing at being a teacher in that calligraphy class. It's disgraceful.
Exactly, Mike. She acts up because you let her get away with it. You should be stricter with her.
My only solace was that Ryan had grown up unaffected by the outdated views of these two. Responding to them only added fuel to the fire, so I stayed silent and kept doing my chores. When Ryan was at home, he would speak up if things got too bad, but every time I won an argument, the two of them became extremely emotional. Sometimes it would even get physical, and now that I've fulfilled my biggest duty of raising Ryan with the right values, there was no reason to exhaust myself arguing. However, since Ryan moved out, they seem to think I've finally become obedient, and the atmosphere at home has only gotten harsher.
So you think staying silent is enough? No wonder even your precious son abandoned you.
My husband and father-in-law didn't even have Ryan's contact info, and since I only kept Ryan's number in my phone, they assumed I couldn't reach him either. It angered me that they thought Ryan was so heartless, but saying something would only make things harder for Ryan. I felt pathetic for not being able to defend my son, but I chose to remain silent.
It's because you spoiled Ryan that he doesn't contact us now. Do you understand how much that's your fault?
Mike glared at me as he shoved his breakfast plate my way. More than half of the food was still left, all of it vegetables. The immaturity was astonishing.
You're still not good at cooking, are you? How many years have you been cooking in the kitchen? You ignore your duties to focus on your hobbies, and this is the result.
I don't need this kind of food either. Get it out of here already. It's inedible.
Both of them hated vegetables, especially raw ones, so whenever I served them, they complained that it was proof of my poor cooking skills. They eat fried food without a word, so it's just picky eating. But it seems they can't rest without complaining to me. But you need to eat vegetables too.
It's not about the vegetables. Your cooking is so bad I can't eat it.
He shouted, and I gave up, throwing the leftovers in the trash. If I only made the meals they didn't complain about, they'd feel sick within 3 days, and eventually fall. And then I'd be blamed for that too, so even if I knew they'd be angry, I had to try and provide a balanced diet. My husband and father-in-law didn't miss the sight of me sighing in exhaustion.
What's with that sigh? If you have complaints, say them out loud.
Who do you think makes it possible for you to live? If you don't like it, get out.
The two laughed, clearly enjoying themselves, knowing I had nowhere to go. It seemed their behavior had visibly worsened since my parents passed away. With no one to turn to for help, they probably felt safe in tormenting me. In front of my parents, neither had shown their true colors. My parents arranged my marriage with Mike out of pure goodwill. They couldn't have imagined the wealthy Smith family would be so full of issues. I swallowed another sigh and quietly resumed my chores. By 10 o'clock, I needed to leave for work. Until then, I had to complete the housework perfectly to avoid any complaints from my husband or father-in-law. What? George was hit by a car in a hit and run. I let out a shocked cry at the call from the police while I was at work. They had called Mike first, but since he was far away, he asked them to contact me as his wife. I had known Mike would be on a business trip for a week, so I immediately left work early and headed to the hospital. My father-in-law was in critical condition, unconscious. Given his age, the chances of him waking up were low. The staff told me to talk to him, but I had no memories of anything other than being insulted by him. Even if I did speak to him, it was only for practical matters, never for casual conversation. The one who truly knew him and spoke with him often was Mike. Once Mike got back from his trip, I'd explain the situation and have him visit. Surely my father-in-law would be happier hearing from him than from me. With that in mind, I decided to do whatever I could for now. No matter how much I disliked him, I didn't want to abandon him. George, Mike will be here soon. Please hang in there. Wake up. I spoke nervously and rubbed his arm. It was the first time I'd seen him this quiet. He was always angry in front of me, so it felt strange. Taking care of him in the hospital while working was tough, but I just had to hold on until Mike returned from his trip. I endured the week with that thought. However, when Mike came back, his response was cold.
I'm busy with work. You take care of Dad.
My husband's family is wealthy and owns a company. He is currently the CEO, so I understand he's busy, but his attitude toward his father, the former CEO, seemed too disrespectful. But at least visit him in the hospital.
This current deal is Dad's pet project. Making it a success is my way of showing my gratitude. Dad would definitely be happier that way. I'm so busy I won't be able to come home either.
He shouted without giving me a chance to respond, then left for work. As he said, he hardly came home anymore, and the burden of caregiving fell entirely on me.
Emily, you don't look well. Are you all right?
Thanks, I'm fine. I love my job, so if possible, I don't want to quit. Being at work is far more relaxing than being in that suffocating house. But taking care of my father-in-law relentlessly weighed on my life. It was about a 20-minute drive from home to the hospital, but the constant trips were exhausting. On top of that, my husband had started becoming stingy with money.
Why are the hospital bills this high? He's just bedridden, right? Go talk to the hospital again. If I don't get a satisfactory answer, I'm not paying this kind of money.
He's in a coma and can't eat, so the IVs cost money. I've explained this over and over.
Are you saying I don't understand anything? Don't insult me. You're just bad at explaining. If you want to pay that much, then you pay it. Why do you think you're working?
I was fed up with my husband not only refusing to pay his father's medical expenses and other necessary costs, but also becoming stingy with even our living expenses. For now, I could manage with my savings and salary, but if this continued, my father-in-law and I wouldn't survive. Since my husband wasn't technically refusing income, we couldn't receive any public assistance. I didn't know where to turn for help and felt utterly lost. It was at that moment that Ryan visited the hospital.
Mom, I heard about Grandpa. It must have been tough for you. I'm really sorry for not coming sooner.
Ryan, there's no need to apologize. What about work?
It's fine. Actually, I had some unused paid leaves piling up, so it was perfect timing.
Apparently, he had a contact at the hospital and came back after hearing about our situation.
I feel sorry for Grandpa as a human being, but that's about it. I feel no gratitude, only resentment for how he treated you. I came back because I was worried about you. You kept putting on a brave face whenever I called, so I figured talking in person would be the quickest way.
What a kind son I have. I tried my best to hold back my tears. But Ryan looked troubled. I assumed it was because he saw our current situation, but it seemed there was more to it.
I know this isn't the best time, but I saw Dad near the station today.
What? But he said he was on a business trip.
That was a lie. He was walking arm in arm with some woman.
I was at a loss for words. I felt suffocated and dizzy. If someone asked me if I still loved him, I wouldn't know how to answer, but even so, for him to be out having fun during a time like this, and while his own father is in a coma, no less. I can't believe this. He dumped his own father on me while he goes off with some woman. Since my husband hadn't seen Ryan in a while, he didn't even recognize his own son when they passed each other. Ryan was exasperated but had never expected much from him anyway, so he shrugged it off as convenient. It seems Ryan followed them for a bit and took pictures, showing me the truth with images of my husband entering a hotel with an unknown woman. Since my parents had arranged the marriage in good faith, I had been resistant to the idea of divorce. But now, I felt like maybe it was time to let it go.
Mom, why don't you just get a divorce?
Ryan gently suggested. It wasn't the first time he'd brought it up.
I'm making a decent living, but I'm busy. It'd help a lot if you could help with the housework. Why don't we live together?
Ryan is a kind child. He's always been concerned about how I've been treated at home. I was tempted by his proposal, but I didn't want to hold back my independent son. If I were to get a divorce, I wanted to do it in a way that allowed me to stand on my own 2 feet. Thank you, Ryan. I'll seriously think about it. Ryan looked at me with concern, but he gave me a smile as well.
I'm thinking of bringing Dad home.
Just as I was getting used to balancing work and caregiving with Ryan's help, my husband dropped a bombshell. What? We can't even provide the treatment and rehab the doctors recommend. It was clearly impossible to care for my father-in-law at home under those conditions. My husband didn't like my opposition, and he shouted at me with an obvious scowl.
Dad said he's most comfortable at home. It's obvious he'd be better off at home than stuck in a hospital. How can you not understand that? You're just going through the motions without any heart, and that's why Dad isn't getting better.
The doctor had said from the start that it would be difficult for my father-in-law to recover. If there was a reason, it was because my husband kept opposing the doctor's instructions and refusing to spend money. I almost argued again, but I knew that would only make him angrier. So I swallowed my words. All right, I'll discuss it with the doctor, but you need to come to the hospital too.
You explain it. I'm busy.
You have the final say, so they won't approve it if it's just me. When I pointed out that he was the one with authority at home, he seemed pleased and agreed to go to the hospital, which was unusual. Maybe he realized that if he left it to me, I'd never agree to home care. However, unlike me, whom he could always yell at, the people at the hospital were medical professionals. Naturally, my husband's amateurish knowledge didn't work on them.
If you want home care, it will be challenging until there's more recovery, and you'd need appropriate equipment at home. You'll also need to discuss with a caseworker and find a primary doctor and nurse to come to the house. That will also require a contract, which involves costs. Are you okay with that?
The doctor gave him a stern look. Since he'd been refusing treatments due to costs all along. Faced with the mention of money, my prideful husband nearly exploded, but being a coward at heart, he managed to hold back his anger.
It's fine. My wife will quit her job to focus on caregiving.
What? You never told me that. Not only was I shocked, but even the doctor and nurse present were surprised at his sudden declaration without any consultation. However, my husband had finally reached the peak of his anger, and he began yelling at me right there, without any regard for the people around.
Do you not care if Dad dies? You're heartless.
Even if I gave in here, it was obvious my husband would start withholding money again. If I quit my job, there would be nothing left for me and my father-in-law but a future of poverty. I tried to persuade my husband with the doctor's help, but his resolve seemed unwavering, and the discussion ended without progress. The doctor and I were both at a loss. As everyone involved grew more exhausted, my husband took a shocking action. It happened about a week after he first said he wanted to bring his father home from the hospital. Suddenly, I got a call from him. I had a bad feeling and honestly didn't want to answer, but I couldn't ignore it either. Reluctantly, I pressed the answer button on my phone. Hello. What my husband said next was unbelievable.
I've discharged Dad. Since neither you nor that primary doctor were there, the hospital was happy to let him go.
What? My husband had forcibly discharged my father-in-law from the hospital. Since my husband was his only biological child, his opinion held significant weight. The hospital couldn't keep a patient indefinitely without any hope of recovery. And there were certainly people who found home care more convenient in such cases. Seeing my father-in-law lying in bed, I felt utterly lost.
Quit your job and take care of Dad.
And now, my husband's harassment began. I resisted, of course, but once my husband was fired up, there was no stopping him.
My wife needs to provide care. Make her quit her job now. Are you going to abandon a bedridden and elderly person? Are you guys just going to leave an old man to die?
He even came to my workplace, making a scene at the front desk. Many of my students and co-workers knew about my situation, and they were all equally shocked. I finally gave in to my husband's outburst, which showed no signs of stopping. Fine, I'll quit.
You should have just done that from the start. Trying to fight back only makes things worse at work. The smartest choice is to just listen to me quietly, got it?
If I kept resisting, it would only cause more trouble for my workplace. Though some people offered to help me by suggesting I contact the police, I chose to resign. Surely my husband's harassment would come faster than anything the police could do to help. The harassment didn't stop even after I quit my job and focused on caregiving. Even though he was the one who insisted on home care for his father, my husband continued to come home only occasionally. Of course, he never helped with the caregiving, and instead enjoyed criticizing me over anything he could find.
Hey, are you even cleaning? There's dust everywhere. Living in a room like this could make Dad's condition worse, you know?
Sitting back on the couch with a smirk, he showed no concern for his father's well-being. It seemed he had taken his father in just to harass me.
Dad's room stinks. You're bathing him, right?
George can't even get in a wheelchair. I can't put him in the bath, but I wipe him down every day and make sure to reposition him to prevent bed sores.
Put him in the bath. I can't stand the smell. The house feels so dirty because you're slacking off on your chores. Why do you think I made you quit your job to focus on the housework?
It's no surprise if I break down in this situation. Honestly, I was really feeling overwhelmed, and Ryan started helping me out as long as he didn't have to run into Mike. While I felt bad for relying on Ryan, I found myself leaning on him for emotional support. I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm really sorry. I know you have work too.
Mom, you don't need to apologize. Besides, my job can be done remotely just fine. I've always regretted leaving you behind when I moved out. Please, just let me do this for my own peace of mind.
It's hard to believe he's related to my husband by blood. How could he be such a kind child? Ryan's kindness seeped into my worn-out heart. However, as if he couldn't even tolerate that brief moment of peace, my husband went on to say something even more outrageous.
My mistress is pregnant. Take Dad and leave.
Hey, how can you say that without even helping with the caregiving?
Ryan, calm down. At first, it seemed my husband didn't know who Ryan was. But after seeing my reaction and hearing the name, he finally remembered his own son. He frowned obviously and glared at Ryan with displeasure.
What are you doing here? Just showing up now. You're probably just after the inheritance. I won't give a cent to a cold-hearted son like you. Get out along with that woman.
Ryan was too stunned by his father's words to say anything. In contrast, I felt a chilling calm wash over me. Fine, but I'm leaving George here, because... I lifted the blanket covering my father-in-law and showed his back to my husband. There was a corset wrapped around him, but scars were visible over a wide area. It looked like it was still in the process of healing, and it seemed my husband was seeing it for the first time. His eyes began to shake and dart around. George still hasn't regained consciousness, and he shouldn't be moved carelessly. It was risky enough for him to come back here, let alone move again. If he had stayed in the hospital, he might have recovered a bit, but you insisted on bringing him home.
But he could be discharged, couldn't he?
Despite being visibly shaken by the sight of the scars, my husband stubbornly tried to argue back. Even in front of his severely injured father, he was still trying to pin the blame on me. How pathetic. The caseworker also said not to put too much strain on him. Moving right now is out of the question. Do you even care what happens to your own father?
It's because you aren't taking proper care of him. Stop trying to put the blame on me.
My husband reflexively shouted in response to my words. It was Ryan who argued back.
Knock it off. Mom isn't obligated to take care of Grandpa.
Bringing him to this house was the limit, And besides, you're his actual son. Even if I said I'd take him after we divorced, the caseworker, the primary doctor, and everyone else would object. No one would approve it. Go ahead and suggest it. Unlike the time he was discharged, no one will agree now. My rebuttal seemed to genuinely surprise my husband. At first, he looked shocked, but soon his face turned bright red with anger at being challenged.
Who do you think you're talking to? Things will never go the way you want.
Enough already. That's what I should be saying to you.
Ryan shouted, and the intensity of it made my husband fall silent. Whether he was embarrassed by losing to his own son, his body shook with frustration.
You said you'd take care of Grandpa when you discharged him, didn't you? But you haven't even bothered to come home most of the time.
Ryan found this out after asking his contact at the hospital. There are also plenty of other things I could use against my husband if I wanted to.
In addition, you might have forgotten, but you demanded that Mom quit her job at the calligraphy school. You also intimidated the staff and caused a scene at the reception. The police know all about that. I'll give you back your own words. Don't think everything will always go your way.
I packed my things and got ready to leave the house. It had been quite some time since my husband started withholding our living expenses. Since I had been considering divorce ever since his affair was discovered, I was ready to leave immediately.
And for all the unfair things you've done to Mom and the proof of your affair you just mentioned, get ready to pay Mom a hefty amount in alimony.
You! How dare you talk to your own parent like that?
Ha! You didn't even remember my face, and now you say that?
If you want to leave so badly, then leave. I won't pay a cent, even if you sue.
After spitting those words at Ryan, my husband turned to look at me. Seeing me with my bags packed, his expression changed.
Hey, take Dad with you. It's your job to take care of him.
He still didn't understand a word Ryan or I had said. A deep anger welled up from within me. I told you he can't be moved. Were you even listening? If you think I'm lying, go confirm it with the caseworker yourself. Finally, I'd had enough, and I yelled louder than I ever had before. Maybe my husband hadn't expected this because he fell completely silent. Ryan spoke to him one last time.
I know you took time off work for caregiving and then cheated on Mom. I've informed your company, so you can look forward to their response.
That seemed to bring my husband back to his senses. He smirked mockingly and glared at his own son with eyes full of hatred.
I'm the CEO. A response. Don't make me laugh.
There's no hope for him anymore. I didn't even feel like turning back to look at him. After that, I ended up staying at Ryan's place for the time being. I couldn't stay with my son forever, so I had already started looking for a job and a new place.
You don't have to rush. Why not take it easy for a while? You've been through a lot, Mom.
Thank you, but it helps me take my mind off things if I stay busy. Ryan stopped working remotely and started going into the office. Since I was alone during the day, I helped with the housework, but I wasn't working, and there was no caregiving to do. Ryan, of course, never suddenly yelled at me, so it felt like heaven. And perhaps because of that, painful memories would sometimes come to mind out of nowhere. That day too, I remembered being yelled at by my husband, and my mood sank.
Hey, open up. I know you're in there. Get out here now.
Wait, is this for real? As if the painful memories had come to life, my husband's voice echoed through the room. Hoping it was just a dream, I looked at the door camera and saw my husband standing there with his mistress, Megan. While I was deciding whether to answer or ignore them, they began shouting loudly.
Because of you, my life is ruined. Dad has died.
Leaving a dependent elderly person behind is unbelievable. You're heartless.
If this continues, I'll only cause more trouble for Ryan. I'm already imposing on him by staying here. Be quiet. Unable to take it anymore, I rushed out of the room, and the two of them looked at me with smirking, nasty smiles. They must think their prey has finally come out of hiding.
Don't you dare act all high and mighty. You abandoned your own father.
I heard it all from Mike. You were out playing around instead of doing proper housework.
So you divorced me without any gratitude for me supporting you. And now you're tricking our son into taking care of you.
At least it seemed they didn't plan to say anything bad about Ryan. That gave me a small sense of relief, but I couldn't stay quiet in the face of baseless accusations. Stop saying things that aren't true.
That's you. You greedy, cunning woman.
My husband's behavior was exaggerated, almost theatrical. It seemed his goal was to spread bad rumors about me.
You're the one trying to get alimony with false claims. Mike's already suffered enough. What more do you want to take from him?
What in the world has this woman heard from him? Or perhaps she knows everything and is helping him anyway. I was at a loss for words. After all the horrible treatment, I never expected them to be so shamelessly defiant. As I stood there, stunned, the building's security guard approached me.
Is anything going wrong?
It was Megan who answered his question.
Sure, she's wrong. She abandoned her own father. What a horrible woman. Call the police?
Megan screamed, but the guard remained calm.
I've heard about the situation from Ryan.
Had Ryan predicted this would happen? The guard glared at my husband and Megan.
I've already called the police, so you two will need to come with me. Emily, please go back inside. Ryan will be back soon.
As I was being led back to the apartment, the police arrived and put a hand on my husband and Megan's shoulders.
She's fooled all of you.
Yes, we're the real victims here.
No matter how much they yelled, the fact remained that they had caused a scene in front of someone's home, and it seemed Ryan had already informed the authorities, so the two of them were taken away without argument. Ryan returned 30 minutes later.
Mom, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Are you okay?
I'm the one who should apologize for causing trouble. Ryan, who apologized first, had a somewhat relieved expression. When I asked him why, he responded with a mischievous smile.
Dad's company just became a subsidiary of mine.
What? Ryan started his own company with friends while still in college, and now he's the CEO of a publicly listed company. My husband always said that Ryan's success was just a temporary thing, that people were only interested because he was young, but it seems the real short-lived success was his own.
Because he was out messing around, his company was on the verge of collapse. It was easy to buy it out. He's probably just finding out he's been fired now.
Ryan looked genuinely amused as he said that. A few days later, a news article appeared about my husband and Megan being arrested.
Wow, I'm actually surprised.
What do you mean? As I read through the details, the phrase hit and run on a parent jumped out at me. Apparently, since the company was failing and his father told him to step down as CEO, my husband conspired with Megan to run his father over. So that business trip was just to create an alibi. If he were close enough to rush to the hospital, he might have been suspected of the hit and run, so he even bought a train ticket and told both the company and me he was on a trip. The case drew significant attention due to his selfish motives and his collaboration with his mistress, and it was covered on talk shows for some time. Reporters persistently tried to get comments from Ryan and me, but since we were in the middle of divorce proceedings and had essentially cut ties, the focus gradually shifted to Megan's relationships and the large amounts of embezzlement my husband had committed. I can't believe he was embezzling too.
Sounds like the company plans to sue him.
In a way, it was a small blessing amidst the misfortune, as my husband's arrest made the divorce process go smoothly. It looks like I'll get nearly the full amount of alimony I was asking for. However, now that my ex-husband is a criminal facing a lawsuit from his company, I doubt he'll be able to pay the alimony. The Smith family was wealthy, and my ex-husband had inherited his father's estate, so those assets are being seized to settle the payments, and I just have to wait. Apparently, my ex-husband is resisting, but after losing his job and receiving a prison sentence for such a heinous crime, it's no surprise he's seen as unable to pay. It's pointless for him to resist. Though life was hectic for a while, once things settled down, I decided to visit the house. It was the house where I spent years being mistreated by my father-in-law and husband. Honestly, aside from raising Ryan, I have no good memories there, but still, having spent so many years in that house, I was curious about its current state. With Ryan seeing me off, I went alone, only to find that the old house was being demolished and a new one was being built. The surrounding land, which had also belonged to the Smith family, already had a buyer. I felt a mix of sadness and relief. As I stood there, feeling both freed and abandoned, a neighbor called out to me.
Hey, are you Emily?
You. I was at a loss for words. For a moment, I even thought I might be scolded for being related to a criminal. But to my surprise, the elderly woman smiled warmly and took my hands in hers.
It is you, Emily. I'm so glad to see you doing well. We've all been worried about you. That father and son treated you so terribly.
She kept saying how glad she was, and she was someone who had always been kind to me in the neighborhood. Now that I think about it, even though my father-in-law and husband treated me coldly, the neighbors were always kind. When I went to help out with community events, they welcomed me warmly, greeted me with smiles, and chatted with me. Even when I was raising Ryan, the neighbors were all kind to both of us.
I'm sorry I could only watch back then and couldn't help. Are you living with your son now?
Yes, well, thanks to everyone, I've moved to a nearby town.
That's good to hear. I'm relieved. Take good care of your son.
The elderly woman smiled warmly and handed me a chilled bottle of water. A few more neighbors gathered, and we chatted. When they heard I had divorced and was now living with Ryan, they were genuinely happy for me, as if it were their own joy. I received the same warm welcome at my old workplace, where the familiar faces surrounded me. Everyone expressed their concern for me.
I'm so glad to see you doing well. I'm sorry we couldn't help you back then.
If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask.
How kind they all were. When I was being constantly berated by my father-in-law and husband, I hadn't truly noticed the people around me. I hadn't realized there were so many who cared about me. Thank you, everyone. Feeling saved, I stood there, surrounded by my coworkers, and cried for a while. It turns out Megan had a history of other frauds, and she also received a prison sentence. The investigation revealed she had a common-law husband, and the baby she was carrying was his. She had approached my husband purely for his money. She realized my husband hadn't yet inherited any wealth, and that his father intended to leave the estate to Ryan to rebuild the company. So, she manipulated my husband to try to steal the inheritance. My husband was apparently deeply shaken when he found out. But it no longer had anything to do with me, so I just watched it play out as a story on the talk shows. A few years later, I heard through the grapevine that the two had been released, but I don't know what happened to them after that. With their faces so widely publicized, I doubt they'll ever be able to live normal lives again. With my ex-husband in that state, he never returned to the area around his family home, and my father-in-law ended up quietly buried in a shared cemetery nearby without even a proper gravestone. After the divorce, I received a decent amount of alimony and rented an apartment. Ryan had offered to let me live with him until the end, but I didn't want to disrupt his successful life, nor could I keep relying on him forever. In the end, I got my old job back at the calligraphy school and decided to support myself. Now that I no longer had to worry about my father-in-law or husband, I often visited Ryan's house, and Ryan would come to visit me too. I couldn't do that before, but now I could go out with my coworkers, interact with my students, and enjoy every day to the fullest. Ryan is planning to introduce his girlfriend to me soon, and I'm really looking forward to it. My life is just beginning. After all those years of holding back, I plan to live life to the fullest and enjoy every moment.
Sign it. I've been waiting for this divorce form.
My husband, Arthur, thrust the divorce papers at me roughly, leaving me in shock. Next to him, a young woman is grinning.
Well, so you're Arthur's wife? Sign the papers right now. We're getting married.
Even if Michelle forgives you for having a mistress and a secret child, I won't.
Grandma, you're so cool. But don't push yourself too hard. It's bad for your health. You're an old lady after all, so just take it easy.
Arthur's mistress, Emily, mocks my mom with a sneer. It was irritating, but my mom wasn't someone to be intimidated by such things.
Oh, you don't know about that, do you?
My mom smirks confidently.
What do you mean by that?
That is that. You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Emily was clearly shaken. My name is Michelle Johnson. I'm 41 years old. It's been 16 years since I married Arthur. Arthur was a classmate from college. I remember him as flashy, outgoing, smooth-talking, and always surrounded by girls. He was a typical playboy. I didn't like guys who were showy, so I kept my distance from Arthur. I had no intention of getting close to him, nor was I interested. Unlike the other girls, I didn't fall for his charms. Maybe that's what caught Arthur's interest. He started talking to me and persistently asking me out. I'm not good at saying no, but at first I managed to come up with excuses and kept refusing. But when I ran out of excuses and started feeling guilty about turning him down all the time, I finally agreed to go out with him, just once. It must have been a moment of weakness. I never imagined that my decision would lead to such deep regret later on. Arthur started a web development company with his friends while still in college. Since he contributed half the capital, he became the CEO. He was smart, good at reading trends, and had a knack for getting by, so the company quickly got off the ground. A college student became the CEO, and the company kept growing. He even got featured in magazines and became somewhat of a celebrity. After that fateful day, when I started dating Arthur, I began to feel like he was someone from a distant world and started distancing myself. That only seemed to fuel Arthur's determination, and shortly after graduating college, I was half coerced into marriage.
Let's get married.
It was an unexpected proposal for me. Really, I was at a loss for words. I hadn't even considered marriage.
What's the matter? Isn't this the part where you tear up and say, I'd love to? Are you so moved that you can't speak?
No, that's not it.
Not it? That hurts me, a famous college student CEO like me proposing. Any normal girl would cry tears of joy.
I'm sorry. It's just that I think it's too soon. I just started my job, and I won't be able to balance work and household duties if I don't get the hang of it first. I hurriedly tried to correct myself.
You plan on continuing to work? I'm making enough money for the both of us. So just quit.
I quickly realized after we started dating that Arthur never changes his mind. I knew this conversation was pointless, but I didn't want Arthur deciding my life for me. But I went to college and got a job, so I want to keep working. This was something I wasn't willing to compromise on. I clung to this idea desperately.
Well, you've already achieved your goal of getting a job, so you can call it quits now.
Arthur's logic never made sense to me. In the end, I stayed quiet, and that satisfied Arthur.
Are you saying, Michelle, that you want to reject my proposal?
No, that's not it.
Then it's settled. Let's start planning everything. We're going to be busy.
I couldn't say anything more. There was no reason for anyone to oppose my marriage to Arthur, who was a successful professional with a solid income. I remember feeling like I was being swept up in a whirlwind as everything moved forward quickly, despite my own feelings. A flashy wedding, an extravagant honeymoon. From the outside, I must have seemed like the picture of happiness. I wasn't too thrilled about the marriage, but seeing how happy my mom was made me resolve to take care of my new home. Watching Arthur devote himself even more to his work, trusting me to take care of the household, brought me a certain sense of satisfaction. But that didn't last long.
Michelle, you should go to the doctor.
For what?
For our baby. It's been a while, and nothing's happened yet. My parents are asking when they can expect some news.
Arthur's parents were very strict and didn't really approve of their flashy son. However, his relationship with his parents improved after our marriage. I often visited his family's home and felt they were fond of me. Despite his flashy ways, Arthur held on to some old-fashioned ideas, like wanting his company to be passed down to a son. A son? That's pretty old-fashioned, isn't it? Maybe it's the influence of his strict parents. We weren't using any contraception, but still, nothing happened. I thought it would happen eventually, so I wasn't too concerned. But Arthur didn't seem to feel the same way. Sure, but isn't it pointless for me to go alone? Isn't this something we should do together?
What? Are you saying it's my fault? It's you, Michelle.
That's not what I mean. I've heard that compatibility might be a factor. Since this is about both of us, I think we should go together.
If you go and they find something wrong, then I won't need to go. If they don't find anything, I'll go too. But for now, go yourself today.
I was angry that Arthur was trying to push all the responsibility onto me, but arguing was pointless. I decided to go along with it and visited the obstetrics and gynecology that day. The results showed no abnormalities. I have no problem. It's your turn. I told him the results when he got home that night.
What's with that tone? Are you saying it's my fault?
I'm not saying that. I'm just telling you the results. Besides, I think it's okay if we wait a bit longer for kids. Wasn't it Arthur who said he'd go if there was nothing wrong with me?
If you keep saying we can wait, time will fly by before you know it. It's because you're not taking this seriously that nothing's happening. You need to get serious.
Get serious? How exactly am I supposed to get serious? Is he really trying to blame me for not being able to have a child? Is he afraid of finding out if something's wrong with him? In the end, Arthur never went to the doctor. Eventually, we gave up on having children, and our life together continued without them. Arthur became more and more absorbed in his work, coming home late just to sleep. Even when we did see each other, we barely spoke, and our marriage grew cold. With too much time on my hands, I started thinking I wanted to do something for myself. I also began to think about gaining the financial independence to live without relying on Arthur. As a child, I dreamed of owning a general shop. You only live once. Even if it doesn't work out, I want to make an effort to achieve that dream. That's what I thought, so I told Arthur. It was the first real conversation we'd had in a long time.
A general store? What a joke.
It's been my dream since I was a kid. I won't trouble you, Arthur.
Are you planning to play shopkeeper? You, Michelle, who's hardly worked a day in your life? I'm not giving you a dime. If you still want to do it, go ahead.
Arthur's response was expected. I never planned to ask for his help anyway. The only reason I could open my little shop was thanks to my mom's support. Thank you so much. I'll work hard and pay you back, I promise. I lost my dad to illness when I was in elementary school. After that, my mom used my dad's life insurance money to start a small restaurant, made it successful, and raised me on her own. She is still a capable mom who runs a small restaurant.
You don't need to pay me back. Just work hard with that spirit.
With my mom's support, I'm sure it'll work out. I had a feeling it would. I had plenty of time. I carefully selected the items to sell in my store. The time I spent was worth it. The shop gained a reputation for carrying quality items, and customers increased day by day. My feeling was right. My mom's support became the wind at my back. My life, which once revolved around waiting for Arthur to come home, became busier. But I didn't want to neglect the housework. I made sure to keep up with cleaning and laundry, and I paid even more attention to Arthur's meals so he wouldn't say, "It's because you're working." Yet, Arthur came home later and later, and there were even nights he didn't come home at all. Is your work so busy that you can't come home?
Yeah.
His responses were curt. Take care of yourself. You're not young anymore.
Stop it. Don't talk to me like my mom. Just because you couldn't be one doesn't mean you can treat me like a substitute.
He was in a bad mood today. Sorry, that wasn't my intention.
It's boring at home. Maybe it'd be different if we had kids.
When he's in a bad mood, he blames our lack of children on me, as if it's my fault. Even though he never made any effort, he blames others when things don't go well. I can't take him seriously. What about tomorrow? Will you be home? I'd like a heads up if you're not coming back, so dinner doesn't go to waste.
Do I have to inform you every time? Just eat the leftovers yourself the next day.
At some point, Arthur stopped calling me by my name. At first, being called you made me feel belittled and upset, but now I'm used to it. In the end, Arthur didn't come home the next day either, without any word. It's good if he comes home twice a week. He brings home a pile of laundry, grabs a few days' worth of clothes, and leaves again. One day, as I was about to do Arthur's laundry, I stopped. There was a t-shirt mixed in that didn't belong to him. Judging by the size and design, it was clearly a woman's. So that's how it is. Oddly enough, I didn't feel anything. I guess I knew deep down that this day would come. When Arthur came home, I asked him directly, "Do you have someone else?"
What are you talking about?
This isn't yours, is it? It got mixed in with your laundry. When I showed him the woman's t-shirt, Arthur was momentarily surprised and then pretended to be calm and said,
Must be from someone at my office. How did it get mixed up?
"Do people really take off their t-shirts at work?"
If you're sweating, wouldn't you change? Are you bored or something? Running a general shop is just plain store, isn't it? No wonder you have time to snoop around.
Continuing any further would only lead to more attacks. If it's nothing, then fine. Sorry for being suspicious. I backed off. But the same thing kept happening. Stockings, earrings, handkerchiefs, underwear. Something clearly feminine kept getting mixed in with Arthur's laundry. The t-shirt wasn't just a coincidence. It was a declaration of war against me. It seems like Arthur's admirer wants me to notice. After it happened several times, I gathered the items that had been mixed into the laundry and put them in a paper bag, then handed it to Arthur.
What's this? I have no idea.
All of this got mixed in with your laundry. This was on purpose, right? She's got a lot of nerve, doesn't she?
Cut it out. My job is nothing like your little shop. It pisses me off that you'd accuse me of cheating when I'm working my ass off. You're such a pain.
He's getting defensive because he knows he's guilty and has no way out.
Just looking at you makes me sick. I won't be coming home for a while. And it's your fault.
I silently watched as Arthur packed his clothes into a bag and walked out. As I heard the door close, I vaguely thought about what I should do next.
Why don't you just leave him? I can take care of you on my own.
The next day, when I visited my mom's restaurant and told her about Arthur, she quickly told me to break up with him. I'm making enough to live on my own. Here, this is for this month. Thank you. My general shop was doing well enough that I could make regular payments to my mom each month.
If you can support yourself, there's no need to put up with it. Have you looked in the mirror lately? You look awful.
That's rude. I laughed and looked in the mirror hanging on the wall. The person staring back at me was shockingly tired. You're right. I look terrible.
I should have spoken up back then. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Do you still love him even now?
If you ask whether I love him, the answer is no. So why haven't I left him yet? Is it because I don't want to admit I made a mistake? Am I afraid that my life will disappear like a bubble? I didn't even know myself. A month passed. There was no word from Arthur. He was probably doing whatever he wanted, as usual. The shop was busy today too, leaving me no time to think about Arthur. As I was getting ready to close up, my cell phone rang. The call was from the hospital. Arthur had been brought in by ambulance. They needed me to come immediately because he was about to undergo tests and possibly surgery. Since I couldn't drive, I called a taxi while closing up the shop. But it was busy today, and they said it would take 20 minutes. I quickly called my mom, and she came to pick me up right away. Sorry for bothering you during your busy time before opening.
What are you talking about? The regulars are the only ones who come in, so it's okay if I open a little late.
With my mom driving, we headed to the hospital. After asking for the room number at the reception, we took the elevator and walked to the room we were told. I heard laughter. It was Arthur's voice. As I entered the room, still doubting my ears, an unbelievable scene awaited me. Next to Arthur, who was lying on the bed, a young woman was sitting, holding a baby. Noticing me, Arthur spoke with a grin on his face.
I've been waiting. Fill out the divorce papers.
Arthur rudely shoved the divorce papers at me, who was still in shock. The young woman beside him smirked.
Oh, so you're Arthur's wife. Sign it right now. We're getting married.
Don't worry, Emily. It'll be okay.
That's when I noticed. The woman named Emily was wearing the t-shirt that had been mixed in with Arthur's laundry.
Well, I suddenly got a stomachache. That was awful. But it's appendicitis. The intravenous drip cured my pain. So I'm probably not going to have surgery. I'm just taking some medicine.
I didn't ask about that. I didn't care about his condition. I understood that this woman, Emily, was Arthur's mistress. But was the baby she was holding Arthur's child? Noticing me staring at the baby, Arthur gently placed his hand on the baby's head and stroked it lovingly.
He's my son. It turns out you were the problem after all.
Hearing that, as I stood before Arthur's child, was too much to bear.
That's quite a cruel thing to say.
My mom, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up.
Oh, you came too, huh?
Arthur's feigned surprise, even though he had noticed her, irritated me. Whoa.
Having a mistress and even a secret child. Michelle might forgive you, but I won't.
You're so cool, Grandma. But being furious is bad for your health. You're an old lady, so try to stay calm, okay?
Emily mocked my mom with a laugh. It was annoying, but my mom wasn't the type to be intimidated by something like that.
Don't you know about that thing?
My mom asked with a confident smile.
That thing? What are you talking about?
You know what I'm talking about. You must have an idea, right?
What are you talking about? I have no idea. Arthur, this grandma is freaking me out.
Emily was visibly shaken.
I don't know anything. But if it's related to Emily, are you sure you don't have any idea?
I'm telling you I don't. Are you doubting me? Are you really going to believe this old lady over me? That's terrible. You're awful.
Emily started to cry loudly. I wondered if anyone would be fooled by such fake tears.
I'm sorry, Emily. Don't cry. Of course, I believe you.
This was happening right in front of me. It was so ridiculous, I couldn't stand it. I was about to leave after filling out the divorce papers.
Excuse me.
2 men in suits and a woman entered the room. The woman walked up to Emily, showed something that looked like a badge, and then opened a piece of paper to show her. Emily stared at it, her face turning pale.
Are you Emily? This is a warrant. Please confirm. It's 5:30 p.m. You're under arrest on suspicion of fraud.
The 3 people in suits were police officers. The paper they showed was apparently an arrest warrant. What on earth had happened? Even I was confused, so it was only natural that Arthur was in a panic.
Wait, what? Suspicion of fraud? What's going on?
Without responding to Arthur, the female officer took the baby from Emily and cuffed her hands.
No, I didn't do anything. Help me. Arthur, please.
I said she didn't do anything. Let her go. Don't put those on her.
As Arthur tried to get out of bed, a nurse who had just come in desperately restrained him.
Take these off. Arthur, do something.
Both of them were on the verge of losing it.
If you keep resisting, you'll end up with more charges, so calm down.
The female officer, who had been calm until then, raised her voice, and Emily finally gave in, collapsing on the spot and crying out. Arthur, too, was stunned and unable to move. The male officer immediately lifted Emily up, and as he carried her out of the hospital room, her cries echoed down the hallway.
We appreciate your cooperation.
The female officer remaining in the room turned to Mom, thanked her, and left. I had no idea what was going on. What on earth is happening?
That girl has been involved in multiple marriage scams.
Marriage scams? After hearing from me that Arthur might have a mistress, Mom hired a private investigator to uncover the truth. I really admire her proactive approach. And a few days later, when Mom saw the photos that were handed over, she was shocked. The woman smiling next to Arthur looked exactly like the person in the photo a regular customer once showed her, saying, "This girl scammed me."
At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but something kept bothering me.
So she went to the police to consult.
I was shocked when I went to the police. At her age, she was already a well-known marriage scammer.
When Mom learned that she would be arrested in a few days, She called the police right after I called her today, knowing that Emily would likely go to the hospital too.
I never expected her to be arrested right here.
Not knowing that such things were happening behind the scenes, Arthur and Emily laughed as they handed me the divorce papers.
Thanks to this, even the naive Arthur must have faced reality. Haven't you noticed something too?
Mom said to Arthur, but he just stared blankly into space. I signed the divorce papers on the spot. Mom kindly filled in the witness section. As I thought about how this was all prepared in anticipation of my arrival, I felt a surge of frustration. But seeing Arthur dazed in front of me, that feeling started to fade. Now, you can marry that con artist. Best of luck. I put the divorce papers in my bag and left the hospital room with Mom. The next day, I submitted the divorce papers. There was no sadness or loneliness at all. Thinking about what I had to do from now on, I felt a surge of determination. I can't let things end like this. About a week later, I headed to the address Arthur had given me. It was the address of the apartment where Arthur, Emily, and their child lived. When I arrived and looked up at the apartment building, complex emotions washed over me. While living with me, Arthur had built another family here. But those feelings were drowned out by the piercing cry of a baby. The child of Arthur and Emily had been placed in a facility on the day of the arrest, but a few days later, after Arthur's discharge, the baby was back home. I rang the intercom, and when Arthur appeared, I was shocked. In just a few days, he looked like a completely different person, so worn out.
Michelle, you came to help me?
Hearing my name after so long made my skin crawl. Help you? No way. I came because I have business here.
Come on, help me. I can't handle raising a child on my own.
How convenient his thinking is. I was amazed, but the child was innocent. I entered the room and picked up the baby who was crying in the bed. As I gently patted the baby's back, it began to calm down.
Wow, you're amazing. You've never even been a mom before.
This lack of tact is something I really dislike. The room was a mess. Unwashed baby bottles were scattered on the floor, and the table was covered in spilled formula powder. In the kitchen sink, dirty dishes were piled up.
I didn't think raising a child would be this hard. They can't talk, so I don't know what they want. And they cry all night, so I can't sleep.
So that's why he looked so worn out. As I soothed the baby, I told him I had just submitted the divorce papers and silently handed him the documents. They were the papers regarding the assets I was to receive.
What's this?
The money I'm getting from you, Arthur. Arthur's voice, which had been pitiful until now, suddenly changed.
Are you kidding? This amount is ridiculous. Don't get cocky.
I couldn't help but laugh at how quickly he switched back to saying you. But it suited him better. I'm completely serious. I'm getting half of the assets, and also alimony. You built another family while still married to me, didn't you? I think this amount is fair.
Is it all my fault? You're the reason I had to start another family.
What reason could that possibly be?
It's because you couldn't have kids.
I expected this. Since I managed the house well while working, without giving him any reason to complain, I had anticipated this would be his excuse, and it didn't hurt as much. Unfortunately, not being able to have children isn't a valid excuse for infidelity. Want to fight this in court? It'd be quite something to see a couple taking each other to court. Arthur couldn't say anything back. He knew he had no chance of winning in court. Not only would it be expensive, but he would lose in the end. Arthur wasn't the type to engage in meaningless battles.
Fine. I'll pay you what you're asking. But please, until Emily gets back, can you take care of the baby? I haven't even been able to go to work.
You expect me to help you, Arthur? How much does he need to insult me before he's satisfied? Does he really expect me to take care of their child until Emily returns? If you're serious, I'll seriously answer. I won't forgive you, Arthur, for disregarding my dignity. There's no way I would help you. Why don't you ask your parents?
I already did. But you know they won't accept this situation. They disowned me, saying they would never approve of me marrying a woman who got arrested for fraud.
The day after I submitted the divorce papers, Arthur's parents came to see me. As soon as they saw me, they apologized for their son's actions. Knowing how they were then, it makes sense they would disown him. Arthur lost even his parents because of Emily. Emily didn't have any parents either. Her parents divorced when she was young, and she was raised by her mother, but her mother went missing around the time Emily graduated from high school. Since then, Emily had survived by repeatedly scamming people.
You know, Emily's had a tough life. She has no one else to turn to.
I do feel sorry for Emily's background, but that doesn't justify her scams or give me any reason to help. Why don't you prepare bail money and get Emily back yourself? I said coldly, leaving Arthur's place behind. A few days later, I heard that Emily was released on bail and returned home. There were apparently many victims, but they all agreed to settle out of court with compensation and alimony. But I doubt that Arthur, who has always been careless with money, has any savings. It seems that before they got married, Arthur had given Emily a substantial amount of money. If we hadn't had kids, my relationship with Arthur might have ended just as a financial arrangement.
I have a favor to ask. Could you wait a bit for the division of assets and alimony?
As expected, Arthur came to me in tears. Beside him stood Emily, holding their child. Why?
It's necessary for the settlement. Please help me.
I had planned to sell the house we lived in for years and divide the assets and alimony. But now he was asking me to give it all to him without dividing it. Even at this point, he still asks for help. Though I anticipated this, I can't help but feel pity for my ex-husband. I told you before, didn't I? I won't forgive you, Arthur. There's no way I'm helping you, but I'll give you one choice. I had already prepared a plan.
How arrogant, you old woman. What choice?
Emily, shut up.
Arthur scolded Emily, who was sulking. Your company.
What?
Hand over the company to me.
What? Are you out of your mind?
Emily's voice rose in surprise.
What nonsense are you talking about? There's no way I'm giving it to you.
Arthur's voice was also shaky. The one spouting nonsense is you, Arthur. You either give up on the settlement or hand over the company. There's no other option. Oh, or maybe you could rely on someone else. I knew Arthur had no one else to rely on. And I also understood how significant it was to give up the company. When he talked about his dream of starting it, when it was established, when it grew, I was always there with him. That's precisely why I decided to take it away. For someone who belittled the person I was, the life I lived with him, I decided to take away the company that was likely precious to him.
I worked so hard to build this company.
So what? That has nothing to do with me. If you hate it so much, let Emily spend some time in jail. From what I see, she doesn't seem remorseful.
You old woman, what do you think will happen to this child if I end up in jail? Don't you feel sorry for them? Women who couldn't become mothers are really cold-hearted, huh?
There's no point in talking to her. It's as if she has no grasp of reality. When Arthur was starting the company, I had invested a little in it. I was thrifty, never spending my allowance or holiday money from a young age. Even the money I earned from part-time jobs in high school and college was barely touched, so I had saved $20,000 at that time. I invested all of it. It wasn't much, but for me, it was a significant amount. I just wanted to support Arthur, and now that decision is what might save me. Fate is funny like that, I thought, as if it were someone else's problem. At first, I didn't hold enough shares to call myself a shareholder. But as Arthur's tyrannical behavior drove away his partners, I bought up their shares, and now I own half of the company. The remaining half was owned by Arthur. I could say for sure that aside from the house and the shares, Arthur didn't have any other assets. If you want my help, the only way is for you to transfer all your shares to me. In other words, you'll have to give me the company.
Why should you get it? Arthur, say something. This woman must be out of her mind.
Arthur remained silent. He's a smart man. He must have realized there was no other option. He just couldn't put it into words. You're going to transfer the shares, right? Arthur looked down, his clenched fists trembling. You're going to give up the company, right? I pressed him, but he couldn't say anything. I'll ask you one last time. This is your final chance. You're going to give me the company, right? Hearing the words, last chance, Arthur lifted his pale face.
Okay, I'll give it to you.
He forced the words out.
What are you saying? If you give up the company, what are we going to do? I married you because you were the CEO. I've been deceived. You're a fraud. Don't let this woman boss you around.
I couldn't stop laughing. What about you? Are you not going to follow my orders? I asked Emily while laughing, and she looked at me with a worried expression.
What do you mean? What orders?
The alimony. You didn't think Arthur would be the only one liable, did you?
Why should I have to pay?
Emily looked at Arthur for help, but Arthur couldn't say anything and just hung his head. You broke up my family. Of course, you'll have to pay. The compensation is $30,000.
I don't have that kind of money.
Whether you have it or not isn't my concern. If you refuse, we'll just go to court. I wonder how a trial would go while you're out on bail.
I'm done with this. I just wanted to be happy. So why is this happening? It's all your fault.
Emily cried out in frustration. There's no happiness built on someone else's misery. Happiness is connected. You become happy while wishing for someone else's happiness. Will Emily ever realize that? I'll go through my lawyer for anything else, so for now, take this lovely wife of yours and leave. Arthur silently took Emily's hand, who was still crying and yelling, and led her to the door. I heard the door close and silence returned. After that, I took over all of Arthur's shares and became the CEO. The money from selling the shares went towards the settlement, leaving Arthur and Emily with nothing. They must be full of anxiety about their future. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be lenient about the division of assets or the compensation. I'll make sure to collect what's owed.
Can't you give me a little more time? The settlement took everything I had. There's no way I can pay. I don't even have a job. It's impossible.
I have a suggestion. Why don't you work at my shop? I'm busy and short-staffed. I could hire you and deduct your compensation from your salary.
If I have to work under you, can't I at least go back to my old company? I'd be an asset right away. And you must be busy there too.
It's true we're busy. But I have no intention of bringing Arthur back. No, Arthur, I don't need you there. If you're okay with playing shopkeeper, I'll hire you at my store. It didn't matter to me how he decided. As long as I got the unpaid assets and compensation, that's all I cared about. I had no intention of waiting. Apparently, working at my shop was too much of a blow to Arthur's pride, so he refused my offer and started working as a laborer at a construction site instead. Whether he worked under me or not, the amount he owed didn't change. I made sure to check every month that the payments were made on time and contacted him if they were even a day late. He should be grateful I'm letting him pay in installments. Now, Emily works at my shop too, cleaning early in the morning before Arthur leaves for work. Her salary goes straight to me as compensation, so she doesn't see a single cent.
Why do I have to do this kind of work?
She's not happy about it, but with a small child and being out on bail, it's unlikely she'll find another place willing to hire her. She has no choice but to work here. How long can Emily, who has lived a flashy life by deceiving countless men, endure this dull job? Arthur's income has dropped significantly from when he was the CO, and their life is unexpectedly tough. It seems like they argue constantly. The day they split up might not be far off. Meanwhile, my shop is still growing in sales. We've even started online sales, and I've had to hire more staff because I can't handle it all by myself. Managing the shop was already busy enough, but now that I'm running the company too, I'm so swamped that I could use all the help I can get. I even asked my mom if she could close her small restaurant and come help me, but she quickly turned me down.
This job is my passion, so please don't take it away from me.
Mom says with a smile. Her smile is my motivation. Right now, I can't help but enjoy my work. The general store is my childhood dream come true. I feel like I'm nurturing it with care. The company I took from Arthur holds a special place in my heart because I've known it since I was young. That said, managing it has been tough for someone like me with no experience, and I couldn't have done it without my team. When they found out I became the owner, some old colleagues returned and joined in the management. It's incredibly reassuring. I'm hopeful that together, we'll make it even bigger. It's busy, but full days. I've had my share of painful and frustrating moments, but now I feel incredibly happy. With the support of my mom and my team, I'm fully immersed in the work I love.
You're looking great lately.
Mom said as I glanced in the mirror. There, I saw a vibrant version of myself.
I'm leaving you for my mistress. Leave the house and the car behind.
I got a sudden call from my husband, who was supposed to be on a business trip abroad, and he casually announced he wanted a divorce. But I wasn't that surprised. My husband has always thought he was the most important person in the family and looked down on me and our sons. So even though he suddenly told me he had a mistress, I figured he wouldn't have any problem cheating. But he kept talking on the phone, asking if I was surprised or saying he'd forgive me if I got on my knees and apologized. I let out a big sigh. Then, to tell my clueless husband a certain truth, I slowly began to speak. My name is Karen, a 46-year-old working housewife. I live with my eldest son, Sam, my younger son, David, and my husband, John. Sam just turned 17 this year and is busy studying for college entrance exams. David, on the other hand, is in the basketball club and isn't as good at studying, but he's working hard to become a professional player in the future. Both of them are my precious sons. They've long surpassed me in height, and it took a lot of hard work to bring them this far. That's because I've been working hard since I returned from maternity leave with David, having to manage household chores and child rearing in my busy schedule. Despite how busy I was, my husband, John, wasn't cooperative with housework and raising the kids. If my mom hadn't moved in to help with child rearing and housework, I would have reached my limit long ago. However, John once said to me at that time,
"Aren't you relying on your mom too much? You should have more awareness as a mother. Listen, a mother should be."
Instead of helping, he was giving me a lecture. During that busy time, I was too preoccupied to listen to his lectures properly, but apparently my attitude bothered him. Once, at John's company's barbecue, one of his colleagues said,
"Your wife has been working hard since she returned from maternity leave. That's impressive. Most people can't do that."
No, she's all about work and doesn't do much housework or child rearing. So it's tough.
John replied. Then a female colleague nearby said, looking exasperated,
"What are you talking about, John? Your wife has been taking care of the kids during the entire barbecue. You've just been drinking and enjoying yourself. Why don't you help her a bit?"
Yo, you might get divorced for being a useless husband.
A male colleague jokingly said, but in reality, John wasn't very dependable. Despite such incidents, instead of reflecting, John became a more annoying husband over time, giving more orders without lifting a finger. One day, while I was at work, David's homeroom teacher called. "What? David has a fever." Yes, I'll come pick him up." He had quite a high fever and needed to be picked up. But I was at work and couldn't leave. I also had an important meeting coming up. I remembered that John was off that day and called him to ask if he could pick David up.
"What? I'm busy right now."
"But you're off today, right? Please, can you pick him up?" I begged, but John, sounding annoyed, refused.
"Isn't that a mother's job? People would look at me weird if I picked him up. You can just go."
"But I'm busy with work."
"Your job isn't that important, is it? Just leave and pick him up."
With that, John hung up. I was stunned for a while, holding the phone tightly, unable to believe how terrible John's response was. Then I remembered that Sam's school ended in the morning, so I quickly called him.
Wow, that's serious. I'll go pick him up. Don't worry about David, I'll take care of him.
When I explained the situation, Sam immediately said he would go, and I felt relieved. I didn't want to bother Sam, who was working hard for his college entrance exams. But with John acting like that, I had no other choice. After that, I rushed to finish my work, explained the situation to my boss, and got permission to leave early. When I got home and went to David's room, my 2 sons welcomed me. Sam had been taking care of David the whole time. Beside David's bed were the chicken soup and cold medicine that Sam had prepared. Sam, thank you so much. You really helped me.
It's okay, Mom. You worked hard today.
Sam smiled at me, and I smiled back. Even David, lying in bed with a fever, said welcome back in a dazed voice.
David, you should keep resting.
As Sam tucked his brother in, I couldn't help but feel tears welling up, seeing how much he had grown. Meanwhile, while Sam was taking care of his brother, John was.
You're home early. I'm hungry. Make me dinner.
He was just lounging around in the living room, scrolling on his phone. When I subtly asked Sam, he said John hadn't helped at all with David's care. I was exasperated, wondering if he was really the father of 2 children. A few days later, David's cold completely cleared up, and our daily life returned to normal. The only difference was that since David's illness, my sons had become cold towards John.
Dad really doesn't care about me, does he?
I think I understand a bit of what Mom goes through now.
They started avoiding John. But John himself didn't seem to notice at all. On the contrary, he was in a great mood because of his upcoming business trip abroad. The trip was supposed to last about 2 weeks. Despite it being a work trip, John was completely in vacation mode, and I was exasperated.
I have meetings about the business trip, so I'll be home late.
He had told me that beforehand, but coming home late almost every night was concerning. Often, when John came home, the family was already asleep, but he didn't care and never tried to be quiet when closing the door. Lately, the noise of him coming home often woke me up. Moreover, he got annoyed if I was already asleep when he came back.
It's nice that you get to sleep before your hard-working husband comes home.
He would say things that made no sense just to be mean. I was busy with work too, so it should have been fine for me to go to bed earlier. I thought that, but if I actually argued back, it would only escalate, so I could only ignore his remarks. One day, John was supposed to come home after 11 p.m., so I decided to go to bed early. Just as I was starting to doze off, my blanket was suddenly yanked off, and I was roughly shaken awake.
Hey, wake up! Your husband's home.
John, who was drunk and red-faced, had forcibly woken me up. The smell of alcohol was so strong that it filled the room, making me cover my mouth. "Are you drunk? Knock it off. I have to work early tomorrow." I retorted without thinking, but John mumbled something at me, slurring his words so badly I couldn't understand him. Then he collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep. The next morning, John seemed to remember what had happened the night before and glanced at the breakfast on the table.
I don't need breakfast.
With those words, he left for work quickly. It was probably his way of getting back at me for talking back yesterday. My 2 sons, who saw this, looked exasperated.
What was that? Is he a kid or something?
Mom, can we eat this?
Yes, go ahead. The boys finished the leftover breakfast and, with a cheerful thanks for the meal, headed off to school with smiles on their faces. The night before John's overseas trip,
All right, I'm all set.
John was happily humming to himself as he prepared. The boys watched him with cold eyes. Recently, they had been thoroughly fed up with John's selfish behavior. Even when he was in the living room, the boys didn't speak to him. But John, oblivious to their cold stares, cheerfully talked to them.
I'm going abroad for work. No souvenirs for you guys.
That's fine. We don't really need anything.
Sam replied calmly, and John looked a bit annoyed. David didn't even look at John.
How disrespectful. What if Dad doesn't come back from his trip? Maybe I don't want to come back to such ungrateful kids.
John's attempt to elicit some affection made me frown. This kind of behavior is something children do, not grown adults with their own children. The boys seemed equally unimpressed. Sam let out a big sigh and turned away. David, giving John a cold glance, turned to Sam.
Hey Sam, I need some help with my studies.
Sure, let's go to your room.
John watched in shock as his two sons ignored him and left the living room.
What the hell was that attitude?
I was about to say, "It's your fault," but John suddenly glared at me, and I couldn't get the words out. Then John said something absurd.
It's your fault for how you raised them.
What?
Because of you, they're disrespectful to me. Make sure you straighten them out before I get back from my overseas trip.
With those words, he stomped out of the living room. A week after John left for his business trip, we were having a very peaceful time as a family. But one afternoon, I got a call from John while I was at work. "Hello."
Hey, how's it going?
John's voice on the other end was slightly slurred. He sounded pretty cheerful, clearly drunk. "What do you want? I'm at work." I tried to hide my exasperation, but instead of getting annoyed, John sounded even more cheerful and said something outrageous.
So, it's out of the blue, but I'm moving in with my mistress, so I want a divorce. Leave the house and the car behind.
What?
You didn't seem to notice, so I'll tell you. I've been cheating on you for 2 years.
According to John, this business trip was actually a vacation with his mistress. The work part was a complete lie, and he was currently enjoying a trip with her in a tropical resort.
My mistress, Olivia, is way prettier than you. She still embraces her femininity. She's kind, attentive, and just wonderful.
John kept bragging about his mistress Olivia, even though I didn't ask. And then he said,
It's your fault for not taking care of me that this happened. If you get on your knees and apologize, I might forgive you.
He was clearly drunk, but he sounded serious. He seemed to think that by confessing his affair in his drunken state, I would be so shocked that I would do whatever he said. As if that would ever happen. John took my silence as an opportunity to keep insulting me. I interrupted his rant with a big sigh. And then, to tell the clueless John the truth, I slowly began to speak. We don't have the house or the car anymore.
Huh?
John's voice sounded deflated. I almost laughed at how pathetic he sounded, but continued. Why don't you come back right now and see for yourself? Anyway, I'm at work, so I need to hang up.
Wait!
John tried to say something, but I mercilessly pressed the end call button. The next day, after finishing work and getting home, I was relaxing when John called again. Hello.
There's a for sale sign on my house, and the car is gone too. What the hell did you do?
John jumped straight to the point, and I replied, exasperated. What did I do? I just sold my own house. The car was in my name, so I took it to my new place.
What? Your house? What are you talking about? That's my house. How could you sell it without asking me?
Were you really unaware of this? I couldn't believe my husband was this clueless. I found myself holding my head in disbelief. To make him understand the reality, I decided to explain everything from the beginning. The house we had been living in was in my name. We had planned to get a joint mortgage before building the house, but during the process, it was revealed that John had a significant amount of debt.
Sorry for hiding it.
Sorry won't cut it. We won't get the mortgage approved like this.
I said, exasperated, and John pleaded me.
Could we get the mortgage in just your name? I'll still help with the payments.
Feeling guilty, he kept apologizing until I agreed, and we ended up getting the house with just my mortgage. As a result, the house and land were in my name. This was before David was born. John initially gave me some money every month, but soon he started delaying, and eventually, he stopped giving me money altogether. Around this time, I found out I was pregnant with David. Since I was paying the mortgage by myself, I had to work hard after returning from maternity leave. I kept asking John to help with the mortgage, and he'd say okay, but he never actually did. While he did provide living expenses, handling the monthly mortgage payments alone was a huge burden.
I can't rely on John. I need to protect our kids' lives.
Back then, I was so focused on protecting my kids that I didn't have time to think about myself. If I had more time and composure, I might have lectured John and demanded he pay up. But back then, I didn't have the luxury of time or emotional space. Thanks to my hard work after maternity leave, I managed to get promoted without falling behind my peers. With the promotion, my salary increased. After the kids grew older, I could work overtime and significantly boost my income. I worked hard and paid off the mortgage a few years ago. I thought we would live in this house for the rest of our lives, but I never imagined things would turn out like this. After I explained the situation to John, he still didn't seem convinced.
No, this is ridiculous. I'm their father. The house should be in my name since I'm the head of the family.
John thought that being the man and the head of the family meant the house was automatically his. I sighed and continued to explain patiently. Then why was I able to sell the house and land? If you were the owner, I couldn't have done that.
That was because you.
Someone who isn't the owner can't just sell a house or land. Think logically. John fell silent. It seemed he was starting to understand the reality of the situation. By the way, The car he mentioned was also in my name, and I paid for it. John sold his own car to pay off his debts and had been using mine ever since. When I used a car, he had to ride a bike, and he always seemed unhappy about it.
Why do I have to ride a bike?
Seeing John grumble about it, I thought, if he was that unhappy, he should buy his own car with his own money. Did John think my car was his too? John always looked down on our family, seeing us as beneath him. He probably lived under the assumption that whatever belonged to the family was his. I couldn't believe I had managed to live with someone so selfish for so long. As I was feeling exasperated, John suddenly raised his voice, having realized something.
Wait a minute. Why did you sell the house while I was on my business trip?
Oh, that. I've known about your affair for 2 years. I was preparing for a divorce all this time. I sold the house because I knew you would cling to it even after the divorce. I sold the house to protect the lives of our children and myself.
Huh?
John's voice sounded pathetic. Yes, I had known about John's affair for a long time. 2 years ago, when John came home drunk one night, he said something while I was helping him in bed.
Thanks, Olivia.
At that moment, John had a big smile on his face, looking genuinely happy. I couldn't remember the last time he had shown such a face in front of me. After calling out a strange woman's name, he fell into a deep sleep. Normally, a wife would be frantic, thinking her husband was cheating, but I chose not to confront him. By then, I had no feelings for John, so I honestly didn't care if he was having an affair. More importantly, without solid evidence, confronting him would likely result in him getting angry and making a fuss. However, John eventually exposed himself. Once, while his phone was left in the living room, a message from his mistress Olivia appeared, and David saw it. Another time, Sam saw him arm in arm with an unknown woman on his way back from tutoring. Both of them quickly realized John was cheating and reported it to me, looking exasperated. When I first heard that my sons had witnessed their father's affair, I was quite distressed. Finding out their father was cheating would be a shocking event for them. However,
well, I figured Dad might do something like that.
Surprisingly, I'm not shocked at all. So, when are you getting divorced?
their nonchalant attitude caught me off guard. After that, I began gathering evidence of John's affair whenever I could find time from my busy work schedule. Because I've been so busy over the past few years, it took me 2 years to collect everything. John was pretty careless, but for some reason, he thought he was getting away with the affair. When John heard that the kids and I already knew about his affair, he sounded panicked on the phone.
No way! How did you find out?
Well, you were pretty careless. I gathered all the evidence without even hiring a private investigator. And by the way, I sold the house while you were on your business trip as a bit of payback for all the crap you've put us through. I had collected all the evidence and was wondering when to bring up the divorce, and then John mentioned his overseas trip. With a smug look, John talked about his trip, and I realized it was a vacation with Olivia, not a business trip. I decided it was the perfect opportunity and finalized the sale of the house. By the way, We are now living in a temporary apartment. It's far from the house we used to live in, so it will be hard for John to find us. Desperate, John said frantically.
Where are you now? I'll come over.
He still didn't understand the situation. We no longer considered John part of the family, yet he still thought he could be with us. There's no way I'm telling you. We're already divorced. I heard John gasp on the other end of the line. Yes, John and I were already divorced. Once, John and I had a big argument.
All you do is work. Get it together. You're a mother, aren't you? Take care of the house properly.
During that time, I was extremely busy, working overtime almost every day. The kids helped with the housework, understanding how busy I was, but John did nothing as usual. He was annoyed by the fact that I was busier than him and took out his unreasonable anger on me. You need to get it together. I'm doing the housework in between my busy schedule. You can't even take out the trash properly, so don't lecture me. Exhausted, I snapped and said some harsh words. But compared to John's usual verbal abuse, mine were mild. However, John lost it, slammed a completed divorce form in front of me, and yelled,
How dare you talk to your husband like that? Apologize now. If you don't, it's divorce.
John's face turned red with anger, and he was breathing heavily. Seeing him like that, I realized talking any further was pointless. So reluctantly, I apologized, but I kept the signed divorce papers, thinking they might come in handy. While John was on his trip, I submitted the divorce papers, and it was finalized. I was officially free from John.
Wait, I didn't really want to divorce you.
After cheating, you have the nerve to say that. I've wanted a divorce since 2 years ago. John, in a trembling voice, begged, but I coldly refused. Oh, and I'm not just stopping at divorce. I'm suing both you and Olivia for damages.
What?
Thanks to the evidence I gathered over the past 2 years, I've already identified Olivia's address. Olivia lives at her parents' house with her brother and his wife. She hardly does any housework, so her whole family resents her, but she's naively thinking she'll move out once she gets married. I found this information through Olivia's account on social media. She has a habit of posting everything that happens around her. It was incredibly useful for gathering evidence of the affair, but I kept that to myself. If she doesn't even do housework, she won't check the mail, right? Today, my lawyer is sending her a certified letter. Once it arrives, her family will find out about the affair. I had already asked my lawyer to send a demand for damages based on the evidence I collected. The lawyer is very efficient and quickly handled the necessary procedures. He assured me that the evidence I provided was sufficient to claim damages. This was good news for me, but it seemed like the worst for John.
You can't be serious. Hiring a lawyer, demanding damages. Do you know what you're doing?
What do you mean? I'll just get compensation from you and Olivia. It's no problem for me.
What? This is a problem for me. If Olivia's family finds out, they'll blame me too.
I responded calmly to John's panicked outburst. So what? We're divorced. What happens to you doesn't concern me or the kids at all. Oh, speaking of the kids, I'll be taking custody. You've hardly been involved in raising them, so you can't take care of them. John let out a guttural sound. It seemed he finally realized that I had completely cut ties with him.
Let me talk to the kids.
What?
They're there with you, aren't they? Let me talk to the kids.
I glanced to my side. Our temporary apartment was a bit small for the three of us, so it was easy for my sons to overhear my argument with John. At Sam's request, I had put the phone on speaker, so the boys had heard the entire conversation. Sam listened to John with a blank expression, while David was frowning deeply. I hesitated about letting them talk directly to their father, but Sam and David both looked at me and nodded firmly.
Hello, Dad.
Sam, thank God, you're okay.
John's tone implied I had harmed the kids, which annoyed me. Sam felt the same way, and angrily replied to John.
What do you mean, okay? Mom hasn't done anything bad to us. In fact, we're really happy she divorced you. And remember, you're the one at fault here. Mom and we are the victims, got it?
John was speechless at Sam's harsh words.
Hey, Dad, did you enjoy your overseas trip with your mistress?
David.
You said you wanted to talk to us, but what do you want to say? Were you planning to tell us we need a father or that we'd be sad without you?
John let out an inarticulate groan, clearly caught off guard. David responded with a voice full of disgust.
Actually, we don't need you at all. In fact, it's a relief. Thinking about not having to live with you anymore makes me excited for the future.
No way.
I feel the same as David. Living with you makes it hard to concentrate on my studies. Our family doesn't need you.
With their complete rejection, John started to cry. I'm not one to kick a man when he's down, but I had to say my final words. By the way, I've already informed your parents. They were completely disgusted with you. They said they won't help you at all if you get into trouble. John began to wail. His affair had cost him dearly. Well, goodbye. From now on, we'll communicate through lawyers, so this is the last time we'll talk. Enjoy your life with your mistress. John's voice echoed with despair on the other end of the phone. Ignoring it, I pressed the end call button. After that, I filed for damages for my lawyer. Since John had spent nearly everything except the living expenses he gave me, he had no savings and had to take out loans to pay the damages. He pleaded for help from his parents, but they refused to give him a single cent. Moreover, John had used up all his vacation days to go on dates with Olivia, who was off on weekdays, and still had to take unauthorized leave frequently. This greatly affected his performance reviews, and his chances of future promotions were gone. Even though he had been cheating as he pleased, John was deeply shocked when I divorced him. He couldn't focus on work and would likely be demoted eventually. I was exasperated, thinking he should have never cheated if it would shock him so much. Now he's struggling to make ends meet while repaying his debts. This information came from his parents, who showed no sympathy for their son. Olivia was also found out by her family and kicked out of the house. Her family seemed to be sensible people, and even sent me a letter of apology through their lawyer. According to the letter, they disowned her and threw her out of the house without mercy. Olivia couldn't cover the damages even after exhausting her savings and had to take out loans. However, the lender seemed to be a kind of loan shark, and she was barely able to keep up with the interest payments. Currently, she's working multiple jobs to repay her debts, but I doubt that lifestyle will last long. Well, her fate isn't my concern anyway. Apparently, Olivia tried to steal John from me for his money. However, John's generosity was due to me paying off the house loan, and now that we were divorced, he had no such luxury. Olivia's plan was doomed from the start. I thought they would get married after our divorce, but surprisingly, they didn't. Olivia blamed John for the mess and broke up with him. In the end, John lost his family, his mistress, his money, his home, and his car. Currently, he lives alone in a run-down apartment that's about to fall apart. Meanwhile, I live peacefully with my 2 sons. Selling the house and car brought in a substantial amount of money, so I decided to buy a second-hand house. It's smaller than our previous one, but the previous owners took great care of it, and it looks almost new. My sons seem to love the house, and we live there happily every day.
Have a good one, Mom.
See you later.
Have a great day, both of you. Today, my sons headed to school with smiles on their faces. I sent them off with a smile as well, wishing in my heart that such happy days would continue forever.